up, everybody? My favorite music's back. My favorite crew is back. Just kidding. I love everybody. Welcome to the Tip-Off, the show that sets the stage for the most important news, daily fantasy plays, and bets on tonight's 15-game MLB slate and Bucks Nets Game 5. Let's go. Today we've got Eric Lundquist and Chris Spags. Fellas, how's our Tuesday thus far?
Feeling good. It is the second to last tip-off before the show goes on a little bit of a hiatus, so I feel like we got to cherish every moment we have together. But I think
Thanks for the reminder.
Yes, just a good reminder here, good little plug for tomorrow's show as well, where we will do, I'm sure, the best we can to make it a special, fond farewell for now, at least for the tip-off. But I'm excited to do this one. Excited to, I think, to rub some things we talked about in yesterday's show in Eric's face throughout the course of this episode. So I think we're going to have some fun today, I hope.
Hey, 50-50. I mean, I was in on Austin Gomber. I mean, I had way more Austin Gomber in the field. Didn't work out because every stack sucked. But other than that, it was fantastic. But yeah, no, absolutely love that. We have a cat too. That wasn't Callie. What was that? You can't get that.
There's Nilla. Hey, there's.
Oh my gosh.
Where's that been for the last 3 months?
What the hell? You've been holding out.
She wanders around sometimes. Her tail's been in. I know Tyler's seen her before on some show that we've had, but the cat just wanders around. She's here just rubbing up against me as I do a show. Not the most professional I get. You won't see that on ESPN too often, I suppose, but here we are.
I did a song in a pirate voice. I don't think we should be worried about professionalism too much. All I know is that Tyler just gave me a look like he's absolutely a dog person. That I definitely know. Just cats, and I'm allergic to them, so I guess that's part of it. But I don't have like a disdain for them by any means.
You're allergic to dogs or cats?
Both. I mean, just pet dander, should I say? I just have terrible allergies. Great thing for a golfer to be allergic to grass. That's fantastic.
You're a mess, Eric.
I am a mess. Honestly, I'm a walking contradiction. That's what I am. I love to go do the thing that causes me pain and suffering.
I don't know how anybody at this point in their lives has a pet. I can barely take care of myself most days.
I mean, that's what they teach you, though. Like, I first got my oldest dog, Penny, when I was in my mid-20s. Nilla I've had since college, so she's been around for a while, and she was bequeathed to me from an ex who I broke up with, and we had gotten her. Her and her litter were abandoned by a dumpster, and then we took her and then kept her, and she was brought home in a Nilla wafer box, so that's why her name is Nilla. But she's a sweetie. But yeah, like I like them all. I like cats, I like dogs. Cats less Instagram fun for me. Like, I like looking at videos of dogs more. But it's if I had to give a spread here, I'd give dogs would be like minus 125, cats plus 150. But I think that's still room for both bets here, as we always say in the tip-off when betting on animals.
Way to incorporate the betting aspect there.
Gotta tie it back.
Spags, when my cat growing up was also abandoned and brought into a vet, and that's where we got her, Dolly.
Yeah, I like
after the great Dolly Parton.
Rescue. There's
I've
a lot
never
of
saved an
out
animal.
there. If you know where to look, that's the main thing. If you're willing to comb under some cars, under some dumpsters, boy, free cats for all, I think is the main thing.
Yeah, I just realized that I'm the worst person on this panel. Never saved an animal before. Totally on the outside looking in at YouTube, but God, all right. Well, knowing that I'm the bad person of the show today, we're going to continue forth.
That we are. Chat, what are you? A dog or cat person? Let us know. All right. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for countless hours of content on the NBA, MLB, NHL, PGA, MMA, NASCAR, and every other sport that's in season. We love our sponsor, No House Advantage, and they are taking a different spin on daily fantasy sports by offering player prop contests across the NBA, MLB, NFL, and PGA for cash prizes. This exclusively peer-to-peer fantasy sports platform levels the playing field and makes it easier for you to win real cash compared with your traditional DFS sites. With over 500 player props offerings, No House Advantage is the largest provider of player props in the industry. And the best part is you will receive a $20 first match deposit bonus with promo code Awesemo. Beat your friends, not the house. Download in the App Store and win big with player props today. For the last show tomorrow, I'm going to try that without reading it. I think I have it down.
Oh, I hope so. If you don't at this point, I think.
Oh my God! Honestly, you have to wear a blindfold and do it. That's going to be the bit.
Okay.
You have to just do a blindfold. Okay, there we go. It's going to be like what's the movie?
Eyes Wide Shut?
No, the one with Sandra Bullock that came out on Netflix during the pandemic, where she's blind.
Bird Box.
Bird Box. There we go. I knew it was Bird something, but yeah, you just absolutely just put that thing on and let's party.
Also, I ate mixed nuts before the show. And what is it about when you eat mixed nuts where you just like, they are just still in your mouth? And I'm afraid I'm going to spit at
Kayla. You can't do that. You
just
can't
tap
do that.
The YouTube chat once more here before the show goes on a little break.
Just Kayla, damn it. Don't do that. You should know by now. Don't do such things. That's not what we do here on this show. Especially, I mean, yes, mixed nuts You ate them. There we are. Done.
I'm not lying.
Nothing worse than when the nuts won't leave your mouth. I think we can all agree there, and let's all move on.
It's Spags that takes it too far, not me.
Yeah, look,
Let it be known.
Well, honestly, it was impossible. The way that you were going on about it was so innocent, and it was also just, yeah, there was nowhere to go. We got Loco in the chat. He knows.
We're just going to see if you all are with us on this Tuesday. Let's head into our bad beats. Yesterday saw glorious performances from John Collins in the NBA and Austin Gomber in the MLB, two quality players that we heavily discussed on the tip-off. How did it go for you guys? Spags, obviously going to start with you here.
Yeah, I mean, I feel good about it. Honestly, NBA was tough yesterday where I was, I think, a 2v2 away from the winning lineup, and it was still like a 150-person chop, and those are normally lineups I'm not going to land on with my lineup sorting process where it sucks. I hate losing days, especially where I think that was a very easily achievable lineup, one where you just had the one value play in Furkan Korkmaz, and then our boy John Collins here going off was a nice part, but I think for NBA, didn't have the best results, and it's going to suck on days where you are seeing the chalk go off, as was not the case in Major League Baseball yesterday, but the Gomber one, honestly, like for NBA stuff, like obviously we did debate John Collins, was happy to see that work out, happy to see, honestly, for John Collins' sake. But the Austin Gomber one is one where I feel really good about that. I didn't even play MLB yesterday. Like, as I talk about sometimes, like my bankroll goes to NBA this time of the year in the most heavy portion of it. And for Gomber, I wish I had backed it out with my pocketbook, so to speak, and played him, because sometimes, people see that matchup on paper, you see the Vegas total, and you should be very disciplined with that stuff. But there is a little bit of room for interpretation, room to kind of just look at some of these guys on a different prism. And I think that was what we saw yesterday. So him being the highest scoring pitcher on the slate, I feel like one of the greatest successes I will ever have on a slate where I didn't even play a single thing.
I very much appreciate such things. I mean, talking through it again, it was seeing the 5.5 strikeout prop. That was kind of the shocking part of it to me, was to see that big of a number. I don't even think he got there, but it didn't matter because he gave up 3 hits in 8 innings of work. It was absolutely outrageous how good he pitched, just limiting contact there to the Padres. Everything about that was sharp, even in 90+ degree weather. Ended up working out fantastically well. I had almost 0% Padres. I had not nearly 50%, but I think it was like 25-30% Gomber, in the $18 and the $4. Was feeling really, really good about my chances until no stacks went off whatsoever the entire day, other than Detroit, which I understand that was also 90+ degree weather, and it was just a disaster. So if you went 5 3s, 5-2, if you were running any of those kind of the way that you should be, a lot of 13 gamers, 15 gamer today, you ran into a buzzsaw. It was really, really hard to kind of avoid running into a brick wall with that. A lot of individual hitters you could mix and match, maybe go some 3-3-2. There were some weird lineup combinations that ended up at the top. Not a great day for a lot of 150 maxers either. But the Gomber call was outrageously good. And John Collins, I hate you. It's fine. Here's the thing. He ended up saying he went for the exact number I said, 36. I was like, 36 is what I'm fading here. I'm fading the double-double. I literally said both of those things. Of course, he goes out and plays by far the best game, had 4 tip-back dunks in the entire game. So, I mean, that's just like that's like hitting a 3 on DraftKings. It was a disaster. It was a disaster.
You gave him too much bulletin board material. That's the thing. John Collins every day watches the show. Going to be one of the saddest when the show goes on hiatus, I'm sure. And that's the thing. You forget that you're a media personality now, Eric. And when you say these things for John Collins, he's so motivated, and he came out and he showed it. And I think I'm just glad to see that John Collins will forever remember that I was on the right side of history, of John Collins history, the best kind of history.
Yeah, he had the Lindquist bulletin board effect. That's what it was. He had the bulletin board material from me, but whatever. Congratulations. He played 1 good game. I will be off again next time around.
Sounds like a personal problem, Eric.
It does. Doesn't it, Kayla? I have those.
Are you hitting up the driving range after this? Just curious.
I absolutely am. But also, I was on the golf show earlier today. You guys should go and rewatch that. I was with Ben Rossa. Monday, I got to work with Jeff and Max. Had an absolute blast. We've got the U.S. Open. We got a major this week. I'm trying to decide. I don't think I can make it work with work to go down and watch the practice round tomorrow, or to go watch Thursday at any point in time. But Torrey Pines, quick little drive from here, 2.5 hours probably to get down there from Los Angeles. But yeah, I'm looking forward to the U.S. Open. Check out all of the goodies that we have there. We've got PGA Pro plays coming out. We've got, putting our portfolios together. You can look at what Alex Baker is kind of looking at doing with 150 max stuff. We have a betting article that's coming out for that as well, with everybody putting input into that. And then the Live Before Lock show, Jason Roslin, Ben Rossa, 2 of the stalwarts of the industry. Check it out tomorrow.
Check it out. We're going to head on into Stacks on Stacks now. It is a monster MLB slate today with every team in action. So let's dig a little deeper on baseball before the MLB Deeper Dive and Live Before Lock come up next on the same stream. So tell me, which of these teams' hitters do you like more, whether it be for stacks in MLB DFS or to bet against the opposing pitcher? We're going to go one by one through these. First up, we've got San Diego at Colorado, 22.2% chance of being a top stack with 25.2% expected ownership. Eric.
Okay, so this is the craziest slate that I've maybe seen, in a very, very long time of playing MLB DFS, because I've never seen anything like this where we have 22% for a team and everybody's underneath 5%. And it just speaks to the Coors Field effect of this. It also speaks to Chichi Gonzalez, what we're looking at in this spot, a guy who cannot avoid bats, a guy who has a 13% K percentage. So basically, if you were to make that 11%, math tells me that 1 out of every 9 guys, he's going to be striking out up and down that lineup. I really like the under of 2.5 strikeouts. That's something that I was talking about. There's 3.5s floating out there as well. Go find those, use Odd Chopper to get there, hammer those out. But if we're talking stacks here, if we're talking San Diego Padres, I mean, how do you not like this team today? I just don't understand. It's 95 degrees. And yesterday was a completely different situation. Austin Gomber kind of checked all the boxes. I don't know if Chichi checks a box, I would say would be the right way of looking at it. Up and down this lineup, you're seeing hard hit percentage. I mean, Fernando Tatis, Manny Machado, over 54% hard hit percentage over here on the season. Absolutely like both of those bats. No, there's no way to like do a small stack. Like you're going to make 5-mans of this team or you're just not. I think a lot of my concerns yesterday were going up against a lefty. You were all going to be targeting. Most people are going to be targeting a lot of the righty bats. I tried to go a little bit on like the 1 or 2 stacks that I did have out of my 150 stuff. I tried to just make sure Hosmer was a part of those because he does hit lefties pretty darn well, or has at least done so this year. But God, this 22% number, I'm guessing that it comes in maybe a little bit higher. Maybe I'm overthinking that. But if that's going to hold true, I still think that I'm going to be invested there today. 7.1 implied run total it's now up to. It opened at 6.9. It's gone up another half run here on both sides of this. I'm very curious what Spags thinks about this because I'm somebody who generally tries to get away from the top stack of the day, almost write them off by default. It worked out very well yesterday and still couldn't profit. But like, how do you get away from this team today?
See, I mean, I think that's a big question. You look at the top stacks, so it's hard to really get anywhere that's not the Padres. And they have a gigantic number here with the 22% chance of being a top stack. And we're going to talk to the next of the top 5, but they're all around 5%. So that's a pretty big drop off. The issue for me is the ownership being this high. And again, an issue with Colorado that people just, I think, miss. And it's something that honestly I missed a lot too until talking more to our guy, Max Motrisky, about some of the launch angle stuff, some of the barrel ball stuff that you guys have heard the conversations on the deeper dive. But all their pitchers do pitch, to some degree of contact, won't accept the fact they're going to give up, those hits, but they're going to keep the ball down the zone. And it's not quite as the same thing for Chichi Gonzalez today, where I wouldn't play him as a pitcher. He's not in play in that respect at all. He's a guy who throws 70 pitches per appearance, doesn't have any strikeout stuff like Gomber. So that's not, to be clear, don't play Chichi Gonzalez would be the first recommendation I'd make today. The second would be, though, I think the right move is to limit your Padres exposure again, because he's a guy giving up a low barreled ball rate, 7.6%, reasonably low, 11-degree launch angle. So not giving a lot of flight here. And the San Diego team is not one that uppercuts the ball, where if Oakland were in Colorado, every single one of those guys is going to have that looping swing that gives you the elevation on the pitches that you need to see, especially in Coors. These guys can, BABIP a guy like Chichi to death over and over again, and they can also get to the bullpen. But you think you're taking on more risk here because guys like Chichi and Senzatella and Gomber know to pitch that low contact to try to keep it low in the strike zone and get ground balls. So in this spot, to me, I think the Padres are overowned. I would say the same strategy I had yesterday, where 15% max for these guys, and then try to go more 3-mans than 5-mans. But I think the top stack still has them overowned. They do have the highest potential by a wide margin. So play some, don't be afraid to play some, and it's not quite as good of a spot as yesterday, where the lefty bats were really looking like bad matchups against Gomber, who's also a lefty. But in the spot, I just think Chichi's going to give up some runs. He's going to give up some dings, but I think it's not going to be enough here to have the full stack get there. And I think being willing to take pieces is going to be something that works out in MLB a lot more than people realize.
Yeah, 43.5% hard hit percentage, though. I mean, God, it's hard. I like the 11% launch angle. I think that's a sharp take there, but God, I'm going to just be struggling with that. I'm sure that's just such a big talking point when you see a team like this, but everybody else has between a 3.4 and a 5.3 implied run total. It's all within 2 runs. It's all within 1 swing of the bat. I mean, we're going to talk about some of these other teams. Like, everybody else is in a pretty similar spot, but this is just an outlier on this slate to try to figure out. And I would like to be lighter on them. I just don't know if I can today.
Next, we've got Cincinnati at Milwaukee, 4.8% chance of being top stack with 2.5% expected ownership spags.
This is another one here where Brett Anderson, a guy who does keep the ball down decently well, a 5-degree launch angle for him on the year, but giving up a 14.4% barrel ball rate. And you have another team in Cincinnati that does, play generally with a good amount of power throughout the order. A bunch of guys who also get that ball up more than a lineup like the Padres. So in this spot, I actually do think Cincinnati is probably a really intriguing one for me. Anderson is a guy who actually, it might be the same case again today. Yeah. So it's one aberration with Brett Anderson. I guess it's not even an aberration because it's the situation every single time he pitches, but he has a 0% chance to be a top pitcher today, a 0% chance to be a top value pitcher today. This has been the case for Brett Anderson. I think the last 2 starts where he is just so bad, he's going to give that up. And I think that's something for me with Cincinnati that I don't mind going to, because they can have a day where it's, 5 doubles, 1 or 2 home runs, and that's it. And that could be a good day for them compared to Colorado, where if you have just one guy, if Tatis hits 2 home runs or somebody else here hits 1 home run, and then that's it. Like, that stack might not get there, but I think Cincinnati can, and you can take on the risk here of it not being a blowaway stack. Like, to play Colorado, you need it to be a blowaway stack. To play Cincinnati with the ownership they're going to have, you don't have to be there a bunch. So I think it's a day where I'm going to be on Live Before Lock today with Greg Ehrenberg. We'll talk through it, but I do think it's a day to be flat on stacks and be willing just to take guys like Cincinnati at 10% instead of the field's 5%.
I mean, you got Aquino now in the 2-hole here going up there. I like Cincinnati a lot today. I think that they make sense if you're not going to be going to the San Diego side of it. And, maybe this is just kind of me as well. You're talking about getting exposure to all these stacks. I think absolutely just looking at the top stacks tool, finding out where you can actually get slight leverage. Like, that is such a big thing on this slate. I don't want to play everybody. I don't want to be playing 30 teams in my player pool. I'm at least going to try to get away from doing most of that, trying to get like pieces of absolutely everything. I mean, you could just say, I write off Colorado and I try to mix around everywhere else and try to target some upside. But Cincinnati, looking up and down here, as you said, Brett Anderson, not a guy that we're going to be wanting to be rostering in DFS by any means. Ridiculous numbers, other than the 4.6% launch angle, which is as elite as it possibly gets. I mean, him and Luis Castillo, definitely ground ball pitchers. This launch angle that they have, just low launch angles, but 50.7% hard hit percentage. Ex-WOBA 429 basically for Brett Anderson over here on the season. Ex-slugging 601, only an 11.5% K rate. Like, everything does not look very good for him in this spot. Aquino back in that lineup. We know the kind of upside he can have if he's right, if he's starting to feel healthy again. Them moving him from the 7-hole to the 2-hole definitely is probably a sign that it is going there. I think getting him in your stacks at right now on DK, I believe he's like 2.5K. What is he? 2.5K. There you go. And Nick Castellanos, I mean, it just makes it so easy to be able to combine, mix and match some pieces because nobody's that expensive on this stack. And yeah, as you said, basically not the best hitting environment, 70 degrees, but a shorter porch over on right. I do like taking advantage of this team up against Milwaukee.
Nice. Eric, do we need to get you some throat coat tea over there?
No, well, I mean, okay, so it's post-bachelor party, 3rd show now, just kind of like firing it all off. I'm like living on the edge, a little bit of that.
I like having a raspy voice. You know the Friends episode where Phoebe has her raspy, she calls it her sexy voice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Tara Reid back when she was in her prime. I feel like that's my most famous raspy, and the Lindsay Lohan too. Went before everything went south there.
We'll find out very quickly if people. I mean, they have to like it more than my Pat Mahomes voice. I mean, it's got to be better than that.
Hi,
raspy,
everybody.
edgy Kermit's the best kind of voice.
Raspy Kermit.
Raspy Kermit.
Oh no. Okay.
It was more of a Sesame Street animal. I feel like one.
Kermit the Frog here. We're gonna get back to the top stacks.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Yankees at Toronto. 4.6% chance of being top stack with 2.6% ownership. Eric, Raspy Eric.
Oh, Raspy Eric. Now we're back. I've been looking at this game a lot here today. I want to be getting to the Toronto side of it here. I think just 4.6%. We're saying Yankees at Toronto, though, correct? So yeah. I think I'm going to be kind of siding with Hyun-Jin Ryu on this side. I think that there's a potential for him to actually be somewhat rosterable. I know it's only a 22% K percentage over on the season. Keeping the launch angle underneath 10, that's fantastic to see there too. But there are some Ks to be had in this lineup for the New York Yankees. And we know the kind of power that can also exist there. But Hyun-Jin Ryu has some elite stuff in limiting a lot of these expected velocity right now, 88.4. So I mean, that's a great number to be seeing. Under a 40% hard hit percentage. That's a good spot to be seeing as well up against this team that we know the kind of power upside they can have. They've just been struggling. They haven't looked great at the plate. I don't know if I necessarily would want to go to them. I'd rather go to the Toronto side, talking about Jordan Montgomery and targeting him. He definitely limits some of that hard hit percentage, has a low walk rate as well. But Hyun-Jin Ryu, 4.3% base on ball rate here as well. There's not going to be any cheap runs scored by the New York Yankees today. I think I'd rather just go elsewhere.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised to see the Yankees this high. Like, I never really have an issue getting to the Yankees on days where they are going to be lower owned when they're chalk. I think we've seen that fail enough times. And I know some of the social media Yankees fans out there, media people, and just in general, like, have been really down on the Yankees and just their performance on the year. And I don't know that it gets better against Hyun-Jin Ryu, who's a guy who does strike out. Strikeout rate's down a little bit this year to 22%, but historically around league average, 23.2% since 2019, and just doesn't give up a ton of power. I mean, he has under league average ISOs allowed to both lefties and righties since 2019, a 117 ISO allowed to lefties, 138 to righties. So I do think in general, getting a low owned team is going to be more appealing to me than just, taking the Padres and hoping you could somehow beat such a large portion of the field that's going to be there. But the Yankees, to me, I'm a little surprised to see them this high. And I think they are just a bit less appealing than some of the other teams that are going to be in a similar range of the top stacks tool.
Next, we've got Cleveland versus Baltimore, 4.5% chance of being top stack with 6.2% ownership spags.
So this is one where the park factor should help out Matt Harvey a little bit. It's going to be 70-degree weather, 37% humidity in Cleveland. Those aren't the best marks here for hitters to really get the ball going in the way you'd want, especially where you can get it going against Matt Harvey. Also, it is a park upgrade for Matt Harvey, given the fact that he's not playing at Camden today. They're playing in Cleveland, just a little bit less in the way of home runs there. But I think this is a stack where I'd be willing to take my stabs. And part of the appeal to me is that you really have only two guys here driving the ownership. And we talk about this a lot in the shows where some of the stacks are going to be really highly owned across the board, like the Padres. There's maybe two guys there that are under 15% owned. And that's really why the stack is so high overall, because you have very highly owned guys. Then you have basically everybody else also being highly owned, just not quite at Fernando Tatis levels. Whereas for Cleveland, it's, Jose Ramirez, Eddie Rosario, and you could still get to the rest of these guys and have under 10% ownership. Granted, the best hitters here are Jose Ramirez and Eddie Rosario, but I think if you're willing to take stabs on guys like Ahmed Rosario or Cesar Hernandez, too many Rosarios on this team would be one observation. Bobby Bradley too. Like, I think you can go here and feel okay about it, but a team that really the most appealing hitters are the highest owned. So keep that in mind, but I think definitely worth getting some exposure to going against Matt Harvey, just how bad he has been for such an extended period of time.
Yeah, on 15 game slates, I'm not going to be building mini stacks where I don't have the best hitters from the team in the lineup. And because they're coming in higher owned, I mean, Jose Ramirez, I believe, is the favorite to hit a home run today, even with all of the great spots that we have, plus 250, I believe, or plus 240 that he was sitting over on Odd Shopper this morning. Perhaps that's changed since then, but I believe that he has the best odds 2 homer in this spot. But just because of his price tag too, I mean, there's going to be a lot of third basemen who hit home runs today. There's going to be a lot of places where we're able to target home runs and find other lower owned spots where we can possibly spike some upside. I'm not saying anything bad about J-Ram. Looking at the rest of this team, I just think it's coming in a little bit higher owned than I would want. On this spot. I know I'm talking about playing a chalky San Diego. Again, that just feels like an outlier spot where it's sitting over 20% to be a top stack percentage. 4.2 for Cleveland, considering they're coming in, I believe is the second highest owned stack of the day, right behind San Diego. I think I'm going to take my exposure and go elsewhere. I might have a share or two, but I'm definitely going to have J-Ram in that lineup. There's probably no way around it. I think with 30 teams in play, there's not many stacks that I really want to build where I'm not including the best hitters from these other teams that aren't San Diego.
The last one we're going to touch on today is Boston at Atlanta. 4.2% chance of being top stack, 4.6% ownership, Eric.
So, I mean, this is going to be a decent enough hitting environment looking at it from what I saw last night. I like getting to, let me see what that lineup ended up coming out at. So we ended up getting with Erod over there, Tucker Davidson. It's fine, whatever. Not a big fan necessarily of going crazy here. Boston, you're getting basically flat leverage. I'm fine getting to Boston here in this spot. In Atlanta on the road, they get that one extra half inning, or what would it be? Half inning, 1 inning, whatever you want to call the 9th inning. Guaranteed at bats in the 9th inning, I will say. That's a good spot to be at. A lot of these guys up and down lineup, we know the characters now. Rafael Devers is just mashing the ball with 599 X slugging over here on the season. JD Martinez, 537. Xander Bogaerts, 512. I mean, all of these guys are making just hard hit numbers. Rafael Devers, 56.3% hard hit percentage. Okay, I'm happy to be getting to some Boston here. Really like the Atlanta side of it here too. What did that weather end up being? Yeah, 85 degrees, wind blowing out 10 miles per hour. This is a game you're going to also want to be targeting if you're not going to be going to the chalky Padres.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by this game overall too. It's not as hot of a day as Atlanta as you'd like to see here with the humidity rate only 27%, but still should be good hitting conditions. And on the slate, honestly, there aren't a lot of fantastic weather spots to point out. I know, again, I always do this for Kayla here. Really mentioning the weather. I know it's important to her and important to you guys out there. It is a big part of what you can attack here and expect guys to have bigger upside in some spots. And I think it's something definitely to watch closely. And it sounds like it's just a trope we're bringing in here, and it's covered by the Vegas total for the most part, but it's something that can give you a little more insight into why certain numbers are where they are. But this spot, like Boston going against Davidson, he's not a guy with a tremendous pedigree coming in. He's not a guy that's been, I think, a world beater in what we've seen from him so far. He's not missing bats that high of a rate. 12.8% swing strike rate this year is not bad. 11.2% since last year. That's probably closer to where he'll end up, if not a little bit lower. So going against Boston, you have a lot of guys who can really mash against the lefty. JD Martinez, his splits against lefties for their since 2019 are just egregious. A 330 ISO against them. You also have Xander Bogaerts, who hits lefties pretty well. So I think it's an appealing situation. I think it's one of the better weather spots. So to me, Tucker Davidson, I don't think I have the best read on in terms of him being maybe a mediocre pitcher who can kind of inhibit production, because that's what he's been so far. I think there are enough righties here, though, who have dangerous power to take your shots at Boston and hope that they can sort of thrive on a day where really the hitting conditions aren't fantastic anywhere, it seems.
Spags are resident weatherman.
Yeah, and enjoy it. Enjoy all these moments. This weather stride that we have here on the show. I mean, there is nobody else in baseball talking about weather, so we got that lane fully covered.
Yeah, that's all us. It looks like the temperature actually dropped here. It looks like it's going to be 85 degrees in San Diego at game time. I'm just going through some of the weather. Obviously, here in LA, it's hot as hell in the valley, so there's that. You've got the Los Angeles Dodgers there in a good hitting environment. That's why you saw that. The line opened above 5 for an implied run total, now down to 4.8 here. Last thing to talk about for weather, that Detroit Royals game, don't overlook that either. Obviously, it came through for the Detroit side. I think I like the Kansas City side more, but looks like that's going to be your best hitting conditions, 90 degrees at first pitch, 40% humidity. That's decent enough. I tried to take Spags' throne there. I apologize. And also, Kayla, you in front of a green screen with that coat, I'm curious what would happen.
What do you mean? What would happen?
Just the pink coat with the green screen, would that blend at all? I don't even know. It would look fantastic.
It would have to be green.
Right. I would blend in if it were a green jacket.
Yeah, if you were wearing a Masters jacket, that'd be problematic, I think.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
If you're doing a pink screen,
but I'm saying for our view, like not seeing the green screen itself, it would be like Christmas a little bit. It'd be like pink Christmas.
Eric, are you colorblind? Is that what
I'm
you're
not.
trying to tell
Leave me
us?
alone. Leave me alone.
Tyler is our producer. Tyler's colorblind, and he
is
also
he really?
has a chat about cats killing people in their sleep, which I missed earlier. So that's
yes. Tyler does not like cats and is colorblind. No, I think this would really pop against a green screen, honestly.
Oh, okay. Never mind. I'm a liar. It's fine. Don't mind me. Tyler shaking his head. Yes, I'm just a dum-dum. It's fine.
Alrighty. We're going to keep in the MLB for biggest bat. Which of these top 5 odds getters on OddsShopper do you think is the best overall bet to hit a home run tonight? We've got Miguel Sano plus 240, Jose Ramirez plus 250, Nelson Cruz plus 260, Cody Bellinger plus 280, and Fernando Tatis plus 280 Spags.
So this is a weird one. Fernando Tatis should be number 1. He's playing in Coors. He's playing against a not great pitcher. I can point to Chi-Chi.
They don't have the line available, Spags. They took the line off the board.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, they took Machado. They don't have Padres odds available right now at a number of sports books because they would be off the charts.
Okay, interesting. Well, they were on OddsShopper earlier. Maybe they are.
Oh, they were?
Yeah. Yeah, that was where I got it from.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm a liar. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Tyler's pointing to his crotch. He's like pointing. I don't know. He's pointing down. He's got it. That's what he's saying. Yeah, they're there.
Okay,
they're on OddsShopper right now.
They were not up earlier.
Yeah, so if your sports book doesn't have them, go check out OddsShopper to find these odds on there. But yeah, the fact that he would be plus 280 and you have these other guys ahead of him doesn't make any sense. I'm not a big Chi-Chi Gonzalez believer, as I mentioned, but just still like a guy in Coors who's Tatis. The point here really is that Tatis could be a terrible DFS play and hit a home run today, but at plus 280 hit a home run behind all these other guys. Like these are all names we've talked about a lot throughout the year. I guess maybe besides Jose Ramirez and Cody Bellinger because he's been hurt, but like we all know what these guys are. They're big bats. But Tatis is a big bat in the best possible hitting conditions on a slate where there really aren't a lot of great ones. So I like Jose Ramirez too. I think he's a perfectly fine play. But I do think Tatis, like he just shouldn't be the 5th man on the board in terms of odds. So that's the best bet.
No, he should not be. Also, did Tyler slowly go the cursor just to like rub it in my face? He took the little hand and he just went, Eric's an idiot. Slide it back. slide it over, slide it back. Yeah, no, the last 2 minutes have not treated me kindly. Actually, the last 10 minutes between raspy voice Lindquist, which sounds better than my normal voice, and between this. But anyway, they were not on there earlier today. That's why I apologize. I was trying to interject to help you out if in case it wasn't there. I did the opposite. I just stepped on your toes. I was not a good compatriot. My apologies. Fernando Tatis is the guy that you want to be clicking this button for. I talked about him a little bit earlier on a different site that we were covering as we were looking up and down, where you didn't have to worry about ownership. And if we're just talking about a standalone home run, might as well go to the guy with a 54.3% hard hit percentage, playing in 85-degree plus weather, going up against a guy who's allowing 43.5% hard hit percentage on the season. Yeah, Cheech, you're in a lot of trouble here today. I think Fernando Tatis is definitely going deep.
Also, interesting chat here from Eric Johnson saying that Chi has a 0.5 prop to give up a home run. So he is asking why this home run prop is so low. I don't think that should be the prop line, even for Chi, who does keep the ball down. It seems odd, but Chi is like a league average home run allower, I guess is the best way to put that, despite playing half his games in Coors. So the same thing we've talked about with some of these pitchers. Like these guys, I think it may be something that the field isn't quick to catch up on, but the Rockies, at least the pitching coaches, have told their pitchers like, hey, here's a way to pitch to at least make it so we're not going to be as terrible in this one aspect. So something to keep in mind here, but he definitely shouldn't have a 0.5 prop. Like I think there's still a good chance he gives up one homer, but maybe another cosign to say like the Padres maybe a little bit overvalued in some markets.
Yeah, I would say the reason for that possibly is because he hasn't exceeded 90 pitches all season so far. And so if it has to be given up by Cheech, if he's not going to get to 105 pitches or something, that's a little bit of number that can kind of be sitting in the middle of it. But up against in Miami, gave up 3 home runs last time out. That's a worse hitting environment than he's pitching in today. Gave him up in New York against the Mets. A much worse environment. At San Diego, gave up 2, much worse environment. I mean, he's in a bad spot today. There's really no way around it. I would be taking the over on 0.5 still.
We've talked about Chi more on the show today than ever before.
Because it's a great name and a terrible
pitcher.
It
is.
And a respectable salsa as well.
Is it?
It was a Chi salsa, I think.
Ooh, I'm going to check that out. Taco
Everybody go buy your Chi salsa. And then make sure to mix it with ranch too. That's what we've learned is also delicious.
It is delicious, and everyone should try it.
Is that confirm. A thing? You guys have bonded on this before?
It was on the show. Oh, wow. I guess Eric is too busy with his bachelor party to watch the tip-off.
Rude. Yes, I mixed salsa and ranch on the show and ate it live, and it was delicious.
Oh, my God. That sounds way more fun than anything you guys have ever done with me. You must hate me. It's fine.
All right, we'll go on to biggest arm now. It's fine, Eric. Which of these top 5 odds getters on OddsShopper do you guys think is the best strikeouts over bet tonight? Is there a good under bet that you like? We've got Yu Darvish over under 6.5 strikeouts. Julio Urias over under 6.5 strikeouts. Mike Minor over under 6.5 strikeouts. Shane McClanahan over under 5.5, and Luis Castillo over under 5.5 strikeouts. Eric.
If you want to know what it's like in terms of being sensitive to what price is, to being sensitive to what a line is, to the reason that you should be on OddsShopper, that you should be shopping your lines, it's because of the Yu Darvish prop that we have today, 6.5. For whatever reason, I mean, 7 seems like it is the consensus number around the entire industry on one Yu Darvish. Right now, looking around the industry, of over on 6.5 coming in at -149, the under of 7.5 coming in at -160. That middle ground, I mean, I'm not going to be betting both sides of it, hoping it lands on 7, but I think I'm definitely, if I'm looking at the 6.5 number, I want to be over on that against Yu Darvish. This Colorado Rockies lineup is just so bad, and there's not a ton of Ks up and down it. I believe Dom Nunez is the guy with the highest K rate on that team, going to be in the 8 hole. That kind of affects it a little bit. You want more of those K rates at the front of your lineup because they can possibly see them 3 times. So that's kind of something you look at with K props as well. But CJ Cron, 26.1%, 24.7% for Ryan McMahon, Trevor Story, 23.5. Those are really your only like positive spots to really be targeting there outside of Nunez, because then guys like Charlie Blackmon just don't strike out. Tapia doesn't strike out. Daza doesn't really strike out either. So it's a spot where 6.5, I'm just going to bet on the pedigree of him. I know he's going into a tough hitting environment. We've bashed on Chi and said his name 58,000 times already, but Yu Darvish is definitely the bona fide ace on this slate. I don't know necessarily how much I'm going to get to him in DFS, but 6.5 strikeouts is too low. I think that that's expressed by shopping your odds over at OddsShopper. So check out that and hit the over 6.5.
Yeah, I think Eric hit the point that I was going to raise there for you, Darvish, where, hey, so there are two things with him, that he's pitching in cores, and that's something where you can get strikeouts. And this is something to keep in mind too. Like, again, I don't always want to harken back to Austin Gomber. They're obviously very happy about that, but 8 strikeouts yesterday for him. Like, he's not as good of a strikeout guy as you, Darvish, because when you are facing a team that's not getting production, you can find your way to strikeouts, and that's what Colorado is in every situation. So Darvish has enough of a swinging strike rate, enough of a chase rate to get there, though some of the numbers have been down enough, and I think make him a risky DFS play, which I get why he'll be 11% owned on Draftkings, or at least that's projected ownership right now. But I think to me, it's worth taking on some of the risks. So I think that prop appeals to me, though. The one that I would say is probably my favorite is going to be Luis Castillo. And this is a guy who on the year has not been great, but I think there's a lot of signs for me that scream that he's probably due for some positive regression. He is a guy who's had a 27.4% K rate since 2019. This year, just a 20.4% K rate. He's also been walking guys a lot more, and I think some of that's just been him running bad. So Milwaukee team isn't that good. On the year, they have a 28.5% strikeout rate against left-hand pitching. So I think it's a situation for Castillo where this could be where some of these guys who would just have better long-term sample sizes, you can start to try to pick at them and go like, hey, there's nothing that's that different about this guy, so why is he so much worse? And usually the answer is that he's just getting unlucky or running bad, and I think Castillo is a guy who's going to run a little better today. So very owned in DFS. Maybe you play less of him there and take this strikeout over prop for him.
Love it. Friends out there, don't forget to get access to all the great Awesemo Plus tools and content for nearly every DFS sport out there with an Awesemo Plus weekly pass for $29.95. This includes full access to all the premium content and tools on Awesemo.com, including player projections, ownership projections, our premium Slack channel, lineup builder, and much more. If you're a new user of Awesemo Plus Platinum, then you can take advantage of the promo code we have for the show, which is TIPOFF, all caps, one word. That's TIPOFF for 15% off your first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. Of course, if you're only interested in playing NBA DFS, then you can sign up now for our Awesemo Plus NBA weekly pass for only $16.95 or our $4.95 NBA Weekly Express package, which gives you full Awesemo Plus access to NBA Showdown and single game contests. Really quick in the chat, apparently Chi-Chi is the name for a pina colada made with vodka versus rum, which, ew, why would you do that? And a lot of ranch haters. I'm from the Midwest, and ranch is basically our crack, so lay off.
Hidden Valley is life.
Hidden Valley is life. Yes. Eric knows.
I know.
Fellow Midwest peep.
Yeah, I got the little band around my waist to prove it from Once Upon a Time. It's we're back in the gym here. First day California reopened basically. So yay, my gym, you can, as long as you're vaccinated, you can go on in there and you're ready to rock without a mask. Oh God, it's going to be such a great workout tonight. I'm actually excited about that. It's the small things in life. It's the small things.
It is. Do you have to show your vaccination card?
I think I do. I mean, you have like a trainer that you work with. I just rejoined. I'd been out of the gym for just over a year now, and was like, you know what? It's time to get those wedding reps in to make sure that I can be ready to go for November. But I have a trainer that I talk with, and I've already shown him my vaccination card. So I did that a couple weeks ago when I rejoined. So hopefully I'm ready to rock. I don't have to bring it in every time. That'd be a plus.
Spags, what about you? You hitting the gym?
My apartment gym has been open for a while now, and I guess like it's kind of annoying because we get a lot of Airbnb apartments here, which is not the best, so it gets crowded with people. Thankfully, I've also been vaccinated for long enough now where I don't have to sweat it, but it's still like the psychology of it's a little weird where it's like, oh, these people like clearly don't live here. Yesterday there were dudes working out like barefoot at the cable machine, and I don't live in like a scumbag apartment. Like it's definitely one that's on a nicer side, so you can always tell when it's like, oh, cool, these people are just renting an apartment. But yeah, like I've been going in. I'm back to where I was strength wise before the pandemic, so feeling good now. Just have to shed all of the fat. I was thinking actually about doing, I don't know if you saw this, Eric, the Phil Mickelson diet of whatever bulletproof coffee plus protein shakes for 6 days, and he swears by it. And I'm thinking about it. I don't know if it'll happen here. I mean, if it does happen, maybe we could do I guess we can't do a spread on the tip off either. Oh, it's so sad.
I think Ryan and I are going to do a fitness prop bet if you want to join.
I'd consider. I mean, I'm already so far advanced, though. I mean, that's the issue. Is I can tell, just look at this.
Well, I have to eat a bunch for 2 weeks and do nothing so I can win money. That'd be terrible.
Well, I'll just be over here eating ranch on my pizza. Yes, Larry, that is what I do.
You can tell we're talking about the gym here, and Kayla, I would say, looks the best out of three of us. I'll go on a limb and say that. And then Kayla's just dipping pizza in ranch and slathering salsa all over herself in ranch.
Yeah. I was gonna say she started this 30 seconds of ranch talk, and it turned into 4 minutes of fitness talk. I don't know how we spun that in our direction, but Kayla definitely the more advanced looking person of the three of us.
I don't know about that.
For us.
I do try to work out daily. Doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
Maybe like
you live like right on the beach though. You can like go out and peruse and kick it, and you probably work out more than you even think you do just by like walking around in sand. Like that's not the easiest thing to always be doing.
I have a not popular opinion. I don't like the beaches in California. They're dusty and dirty.
Blasphemy. Oh, okay. Some of them. Yeah.
I prefer
fine,
Florida beaches way over California beaches.
Yeah,
no offense.
Yeah, like Siesta Key's very nice. Some of those other ones, like this, whatever the Sarasota one is, I think actually I don't know. Caribbean ones are the best though. Like, but if you start grading them like that, you just gotta like. I also grew up in New York. New York beaches are generally pretty gross. So LA beaches, other than I guess like the grossest parts of Venice, still gonna be nicer there. So it's all relative. You got to be happy with whatever beach you can get.
That's true. A beach is a beach.
Hawaii. I'd say Hawaii if it weren't for the wind. Like there's just so
Hawaii.
much.
I need to go at some point, but I
need to go bad.
Yeah.
That's where we're doing our honeymoon. It'll be great.
I'm invited. That's so nice of you.
Please no, get the hell out of here. You won't even hang out with me in LA. You're not gonna. It's gonna take Hawaii for you to hang out. That's strange.
In Hawaii, then yeah, we heartbeat.
Oh gosh.
Who was it? Gordon in the chat says Newport Beach is gorgeous. I have yet to go.
It's gorgeous.
Noted.
You have
I'll
to
try
go.
to make it down there. Yes, I need to.
It's excellent.
All right. How about we talk more about the show? Should we do that?
I guess.
Let's do.
Okay.
But beaches and fitness is a great conversation. Showdown at the DK Corral. Here we go. Back to the hardwood tonight. We will see the Bucks head back to Brooklyn to face Kevin Durant and a returning James Harden in Game 5 of a 2-2 series. Once again, there are some big single game contests in DFS tonight. So let's dig deep into the game really quickly. Who looks like the most viable captain on Draftkings and MVP on Fanduel? Eric.
Okay, so those are kind of viable is one thing. Like if we're going to talk what's viable, I think it's got to be Giannis as your top captain. Like especially if we're going to get James Harden showing up here, that's going to cut into a little bit of Kevin Durant. Now Kevin Durant's more expensive than Giannis, which even if that weren't to be the case, I was going to be more on Giannis. But now the ownership is kind of there in a way where it's like, okay, he's over 33% owned. So 1 out of every 3 lineups is going to have Giannis captained because, again, he's cheaper than Kevin Durant. I think if that's going to be the case, I'm going to want to find some ways to be able to get both Giannis, Kevin Durant. I don't know if I can get Giannis, Kevin Durant, and James Harden together. I haven't played around too much with it. But the one guy that I do want to like at least throw out as an under-owned option right now, if James Harden's really going to be 5% here, we don't know what those minutes are going to look like. We don't know what the uncertainty of everything's going to be. I don't think he gets up to 40 minutes by any means. I would doubt it. I'd say it's going to be closer to something like 30, 32. We have him in for 30 over here at Awesemo today. But he can get there in a meaningful way. And if you can still jam in Kevin or Giannis Antetokounmpo or Kevin Durant with him, or possibly just saying, okay, I'm not going to play Giannis. I'm going to play Drew Holiday and Chris Middleton along with Harden and kind of hope that they're the ones who kind of spike the upside in this game. I think that that's a really fascinating way to go. It's very rare that you're going to get a 5% James Harden by any means, but the assist rate is there in such a meaningful way, especially with Kyrie Irving off the floor. I'm going to probably have a ton of him if that ownership stays there at the captain spot.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting situation tonight where yesterday I felt like the approach for the showdowns or just in general was to go a little heavier on the Clippers, and actually the core Clippers rather, and Donovan Mitchell was one. I only put up like a handful of lineups into the showdown, ended up cashing both of those. And I just went to Bojan Bogdanovic as the captain because that was what allowed me to get there. I think that's the move for today's slate. I haven't started to build lineups yet, but I think a Brook Lopez captain could work. I think a Jeff Green captain might not be the craziest thing, though. I need to think about that a little bit more, but he is projected for 30.5 minutes today from Awesemo. But I'm with you. I think that you need to probably end up playing 3 out of the top 4 plays here, and that includes Harden, Durant, Giannis, and then one of Middleton and Drew, and I think that's the most appealing option. I've been very bullish on Middleton this series, as I've talked about on some of these shows. That's paid off recently. I don't know if people are going to be too heavy on the scent, but right now we have him projected for 43.4% ownership. To me, that seems low for Middleton. I think he's a viable captain option, but for the same thing I would normally do on these slates is what I would be doing today, is trying to get less Giannis a captain, trying to get less Kevin Durant's captain, especially with Harden being back, and just carving a little bit off of the value that Durant would represent normally when I think they did the pricing for the slate. So the spot to me, I think, just try to get guys who aren't Giannis and Kevin Durant and be agnostic with it, but do the best you can to cram as many studs in besides that.
Spags, are there any players who seem likely to be core plays?
I think core plays for me, Chris Middleton, another guy that I'll definitely be above the field on. I just am a believer in what he's been doing in the series. And I think he's also been hurting Giannis enough with his usage rate that I think it's something that maybe people miss a little bit in the equation. That could certainly flip back today, but I think Middleton's the one that I will really consider a core play that it seems like the field isn't right now. Same thing for Drew Holiday, though he'll be a little bit higher owned. I think those guys today, maybe there's a pathway to not play Giannis and just play those two guys and hope that Giannis performs. I think that's a risky one, but with Giannis projected for 100% ownership on FanDuel and 96% on DraftKings, I think it's hard to move away from the 100% on FanDuel, but both really you can make a case, just cap them at 80% and see what you can get. I think is an interesting look, but to me, I think those guys really for the Bucks, and then for, I guess with value we'll talk about next, but for the mid-tier players, I do think going to Middleton, going to Holiday, those guys in particular seem like ones that'll just be less owned and also have comparable upside.
I pretty much agree with everything you just said. It's hard to not get away with it. We're talking about one game, and if you're trying to chop 150 ways and end up like what it's been on a number of these slates, like, yeah, it's going to be tough to get super different without giving up a ton of expected value. But like, I think the Middleton, Drew Holiday, kind of prioritizing them and maybe finding a way to be lighter on Giannis might be the way to go over on DK. On FanDuel, there's like no way at those prices, but I think that on DK specifically, there is some viability to that. Being able to combine him with maybe a captain, Kevin Durant, as a super contrarian spot, like playing those three together. It's going to be impossible to play a lot of Kevin Durant and Giannis Antetokounmpo together with one of them in the captain slot and not give up a lot of expected points. But you know, we're gonna talk a lot about that. We've got a lot of shows coming up later here in the day, going over this multiple times over. We'll see kind of James Harden. I doubt there's a minutes limit. I bet it's just, hey, how much can you possibly play for us today? It's 2-2. We need to win this series. It's going to be a long off season. You know, they've basically moved all their pieces to try to make this work. And the Kyrie thing is pretty unfortunate for this team. But I think if you're trying to get different, like one other guy to possibly throw out there, Mike James, I don't know what those minutes are going to look like here going forward. Like, it'd be very strange to imagine a place where he plays a ton of minutes now. I think 24 is what we have him in for right now. But at 7,200, if you're playing him in the captain slot, there's definitely a path where I could play him, Giannis, James Harden, some combination of the three of them, Kevin Durant as well. That might be one guy to take a look at. Those minutes could definitely get up there in a meaningful way. On the season, been a pretty darn good fantasy point per minute producer, 0.92 on the season. That might be the guy to look at as being a very, very low-owned captain to be able to jam in the studs.
And finally, Eric, who are the most interesting value players?
I'll just go back to Mike James here. I don't know what those minutes are going to look like and how it affects, like if we're going to get a limited James Harden, before Mike James would have been just crazy owned with no Kyrie, no James Harden. I think maybe in lineups where you don't have James Harden, or if you're trying to get different, I wouldn't have a problem playing them together. I mean, he's going to have to pick up some of those minutes for Kyrie Irving here anyway. Mike James, without both of them on the floor, has been over a DraftKings point per minute player, usage into the 20s, a guy that I think you should be having a lot of in Showdown today and just kind of take the shot on it, being possibly an upside there. I think the ad ownership is going to probably be much higher than what it's at right now. But looking at the rest of it, Joe Harris, also somebody who hasn't been as good here as what we were expecting. 3 just horrendous games, but he's playing 37 and 38 minutes the last 2. If he can get some open looks here, I think James Harden's going to be more of a creator and open up some more lanes for him than a Kyrie Irving was going to. So maybe Joe Harris being higher on him today is the way to get really contrarian as well.
Yeah, so I think I have some actual legit concerns about Mike James because I think I was deeply invested in Bruce Brown in the last game, so I was going to color what I'm talking about here, but I was really completely baffled why they weren't playing Bruce Brown in that first half, because he's a guy that to me just plays really well with Kevin Durant. We'll screen for him, we'll roll, we'll attack the glass, we'll do that stuff. They went to Mike James. Mike James was awful, and maybe that is still the case. They would go to him first, and Bruce Brown's going to get squeezed by Harden, so he's not really a great play. But I do think that the Bruce Brown offense to me looks far more functional. When they were clawing back into that game, it was with Bruce Brown and not with Mike James. And I think too, with Harden being back in the mix, like Harden's a distributor for the most part in his role with the Nets. So I think a guy like Brown to me is going to hurt James's minutes enough that both guys to me get less playable. The one that I'm looking at though, and this is something that I think is a big question heading into the day, Jeff Green, I think is a separate item here where he's going to get his minutes regardless. The fact that they played him as many minutes as they did last game, coming off an injury, I think was kind of surprising, but he's very much in the mix. But Nick Claxton, they went to a little bit more with Blake Griffin not playing a lot in that second half. And the announcers were speculating that maybe he was hurt. He also just looked sad on the bench. So I don't know what the deal was. It could have been just the fact that he wasn't getting the results in that game that he has historically, but there's a pathway here for Claxton to get a lot of runs. So to me, I think he's a guy that looks solid as a value play just in terms of opening up salary, but also one that could have the upside and get there. So I think Claxton and Green are the ones that I have the highest faith in. And then Bobby Portis on the other side, I think grades out a little bit well. The minutes concern me somewhat there, but I think I'll have enough Brook Lopez that it justifies getting through a little bit of Bobby Portis. But those three, Green, I think Claxton and Bobby Portis will be the ones that jump out.
What are you going to do with PJ Tucker today?
I think you have to get some exposure to him, but 5,200 is really not that great of a tag for a showdown for PJ Tucker. So he'll pop up in some lineups. I have no issue with it. I just don't know if you're building a lineup by hand. I haven't done that today yet either, but I think you're probably not going to land on him. And if you do, you maybe are thinking about it the wrong way, but yeah, it's ugly. And I don't anticipate him scoring like that again. That much for sure.
Yeah, true. Okay. Just wanted to get your take there because you are on fire, sir.
Thank you.
It's one of our favorite times around here called 4 segments, 2 minutes. Let's go. Really quickly, we got to fly through these things. All right, we're going to stick with the NBA for no house advantages prop or not. Here are some no house advantages props of the day for key players. Do we like the over or under on them? And how many points did you guys assign? First up, we've got PJ Tucker, over under 3.5 rebounds, Spags.
This is one that, according to Awesemo, looks like one of the best bets on the board. 79% chance hitting the over. There are going to be some better unders we'll talk about in a second, but Tucker, I think the scoring not going to be there, but just his ability to stay on the floor, play minutes, harass Kevin Durant, it's going to lead to him being out there, and he can stumble into these rebounds. So I think there are higher confidence ones, but to me, this is probably a 6-pointer. I feel like a no house advantage tonight. Actually, no, it's only 6 points. So maybe a 2 or 3-pointer on no house advantage tonight.
Yeah, agreed. It was a great segue that I brought up there. So that kind of saves us time on the front end. Yay.
Wonderful. Bruce Brown, over under 20.5 points plus rebounds plus assists, Eric.
I mean, is this going to be kind of Spags looking at this? I mean, it's got to be an under on that number. That's just a gigantic number for a guy who played 21 minutes last time out. And yeah, we could possibly be looking at him again. Mike James, both him and Mike James were terrible last game, but I think Bruce Brown 20.5 is just a gigantic number. James Harden affects his minutes, I think, a little bit more than Kyrie Irving, but we shall see. I think it's more of closer to a stay away for the most part. I know that we have pretty meaningfully that he's going to be one of the better unders on the board for points. I think the points, rebounds, and assists, it's just he's going to be probably the best bet on the board at 20.5. That's a big number.
Yeah, that's an under here that Awesemo has at 98.5%. I think there's maybe a little more risk for the minutes, but probably not for the production as long as Harden does stay healthy. That's going to be the big thing I need to watch out for. But I think for me, this is one that on no house advantage, I would make a 6-pointer. And then if I'm doing multiple lineups, probably take a few lineups where I don't have it in there just in case there's some pathway for Harden to get hurt and leave the game again. And then Brown does get minutes and has a shot to get there.
And lastly, Blake Griffin, over under 18.5 points plus rebounds plus assists, Spags.
There's another one that Awesemo has a very high under. It looks like I think before it might have been a little bit higher, but still around 70%. Actually, no, excuse me, 82% here for the under on this one. So not quite as good as the Bruce Brown bet, but some minutes variability there. That's not the best for him. So I think this is an under, and to me, probably the 4 or 5-pointer out of the 6-point options you'll get today because it's just a single game format tonight on no house advantage.
Yeah, I mean, you can just play the under narrative. I think that's not a bad way of making a lineup, just kind of trying to capitalize on a number of these guys that are the secondary options. James Harden's a big piece to throw into the middle. Zaps up a lot of production for everybody across the board. So definitely an under for me too.
And shout out to No House Advantage. Download the app today and use promo code Awesemo to receive a deposit bonus of up to $20 for new signups. Beat your friends, not the house, win big with player props today. Eric, going right back to you for your good dog and bad dog.
All right, good. Oh, we got the
dogs
sound
are working
in the middle
fast
of it.
too. Love it.
Whew. Yeah, no, we're flying. Okay, so Kwang Hyun Kim, I'm going to be targeting him with the Miami Marlins today. I know it's a 3.7 run total. That seems really, really small. But on the other side, we got Trevor Rogers, fantastic pitcher. I have no idea why the Marlins are at the disadvantage. I mean, Trevor Rogers has been awesome this year. Close to an ace. I'm not ready to put him in that category yet, but plus 109, give you the Miami Marlins.
My good dog will be the Nets in the spot. I think that if they are going to have Harden back and he's going to be going, and I have to assume he thinks he's good enough to do at least a capable job compared to what he normally does. So to me, them being a 4-point dog at home, I think is not the best bet. I still think the Bucks have a good shot to win it, but I just don't think if you have 2 of the big 3 for Brooklyn, they shouldn't be this big of a favorite at home or an underdog at home. Excuse me.
And Spags, did you give us your bad dog?
No, bad dog I can give 2 at the same time. Detroit, 3.9 implied runs going against Kansas City. They're going against Mike Minor. I think people may be thinking that Detroit's a better team because they had one good day yesterday. Still not a good team, and Mike Minor's actually been pretty decent on the year. So I don't think they could win at Kansas City today, so they'd be my bad dog.
Colorado Rockies. Colorado Rockies. No chance that I'm going to possibly have them. Minus 232 right now is kind of the number you're looking at out of you, Darvish. I'm going to be putting them in a bunch of parlays today. If the Padres don't win, don't talk to me tomorrow.
Noted. All right. Make or break. Which player game currently looks like a make or break spot to you on tonight's Slate Spags?
I think it's going to be playing more Jeff Green and more Claxton just to jam the guys in. So I think that's really the approach to me, get to the studs. And that's how it's going to be in a lot of these playoff games where elimination is now very much in range of a possibility.
Here now, 25. No, sorry. We're just kind of like cruising through. I was going to get my bidding auctioneer. Somebody was saying that that's kind of what it sounded like. Bad dog. Oh, when we just said bad dog. Make or break for me. I am pretty sure it's going to be some of these Minnesota Twins bats. They are just absolutely crushing the ball in the season. Our bullpen's complete garbage and filth and not something that I'm proud of whatsoever, but I might as well take some shots on them. If they're going to have a 4.5 implied run total going up against Chris Flexen in Seattle, I'm happy to do that. The roof is closed. That's a big plus today, so sign me up for that.
And last but not least, fade of the day. Is there one game player or team that you anticipate you'll have a lot less interest in than the rest of the public? Eric.
Oh God. I mean, it's not going to be San Diego anymore. I'm just going to have them. I don't see any kind of way around that. The Cleveland Indians, we talked about them. They've got a 5.2 run implied total, but 69 degrees, winds blowing in 15 miles per hour. Matt Harvey sucks. He absolutely sucks, and I hate him, but I'm not going to be targeting Cleveland bats at their ownership.
And I guess for me, it has to be the Padres again. I think you can get less ownership on them. I'll talk about it more on Live Before Lock here coming up in an hour. I'll be back with Greg Ehrenberg to discuss that at more length. But I think to me right now, they're a team that you can fade by just getting less in the field, and it'll count as a fade, but still you're getting enough exposure. And I think that's the approach.
Phew, look at that. One of our many strengths on the show is that we can make the last 4 segments last 20 minutes or 2 minutes.
That's the structure of the show. That's why it was built this way, Kay. We built the perfect mousetrap to have a functional show.
You guys are pros. Appreciate your time. Thank you all for tuning in. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. The MLB Deeper Dive and Live Before Lock are coming your way next on the same stream, so stay tuned. We'll be back with you tomorrow for the last episode of the Tip-Off. For now, at 4:30 Eastern, I'm Kaylee Kanaram. See you all then.
Okay, good evening. We keep it rolling here as we get you ready for a jam-packed slate on the Diamond. 15 games to look at on this MLB Deeper Dive, and we appreciate you sticking with us, not only now, live before lock coming up at the next hour. So we have you covered right up until first pitch across the board. No excuse why you shouldn't be here already. No excuse why you shouldn't be subscribed to the Awesemo channel, already hitting us with a like if you're hanging over from the tip-off, or getting ready now with the notification bell primed and ready so you never miss a show. And you never miss Terry, of course, as well, as he's going to be here breaking everything down, all your questions. You want to hit us on the Super Chat, the Premium Slack. And the last time you and I had a conversation, my friend, was you, myself, and Max. And I don't think it's any coincidence that A, we've been split up after completely derailing the last show with movie discussions. And now B, you and I are stuck on a jam-packed 15-game slate. So there's no room whatsoever to go down rabbit holes, although you know I'm going to try my damnedest.
Hey, I was in a Fangraphs rabbit hole earlier. I'm glad to get into any movie rabbit. We could work some things in around the edges at the very least, though, with some quotes or something. I'm sure we always find a way. But, yeah, it's a heck of a big slate that we're dealing with, full entire leagues on the board. Interesting that we've got 16 left-handed pitchers going out of 30 starters today. Kind of a little oddity in the shape of this slate. But, yeah, it looks like a fun one to talk about anyway.
Yeah, and there's always going to be somebody at the top, right, that you're going to have to pay for no matter what. But to be fair, it doesn't look like just kind of a big picture examination of the slate. It doesn't look like there are a lot of dominating pitchers out there as far as across the board to choose from, which may make it easier in some regard, but also a little bit harder for the average DFS player to find and maybe mine some value, not normally in the P2 spot, but maybe as a pivot in the P1 as well.
For sure. Yeah, this is very much that kind of a slate. I mean, anytime that you see Mike Minor's name as, the clear-cut top guy on the board, you kind of know what shape of the slate you're dealing with. So there are some good names. There are some interesting guys, guys who have struggled and are in tough spots, guys who are decent pitchers but not great DFS pitchers in some cases, who are in challenging spots. And then we've got the biggest name recognition, ace caliber pitcher, Yu Darvish, pitching in Colorado, but still going up against a terrible lineup at a good price. It's kind of interesting. So there are some spots. We'll get into them all, I'm sure. But I really like slates like this when they take an interesting pitching shape, when there's not one like clear cut or two clear cut. Everybody's going to them kind of aces. And if you don't have them, you're kind of set back by 20 points. This is a slate where somebody dirty is going to be slate breaking on this slate in terms of the pitching options. It just has that feel to it.
Well, here's the thing, too, and you mentioned Yu Darvish, and the bigger thing, of course, from the stack and offensive standpoint, which will go game by game and start right away with Washington and Pittsburgh. But just before that, from more of a bigger picture standpoint of the bats, I think it's a lot easier for people to just get trapped in there's a game in Coors Field. Who's playing the Rockies? Automatically stack that. Our stack tool is going to be overwhelmingly popular with San Diego. So whenever you do have a bigger slate and the Rockies at home are in play, not necessarily them, but their opponent, how do you kind of balance knowing that so many people are going to flock to that easy stack with trying to find some value elsewhere, even if there may not be as much?
I've said it, throughout the season, and it definitely holds up, particularly when Coors is getting a lot of ownership, which it usually gets a good amount of ownership. And then, today we see a team like the Padres at the top of the stacks board. On the DK board, they're drawing a nearly 25% team ownership share. No other team appears to be above 6%. That is so much weight from the field on one team when we've got 30 teams in play, so many different spots to choose from. We saw just last night how a team can get shut down even though they're playing in Coors Field. So it might not be a spot where we're advocating for pitching necessarily. No one is saying that Coors is not going to be a potentially slate-breaking site. It always is. We already got one of our fades out of the way. So there is definitely plenty of support for this to be the primetime spot for offense, but everybody's going to it. So for me, the way I usually approach these things is to undercut the field when they're in situations like that, or to look on the other side of course. I talked about it yesterday with the Rockies. They're a terrible baseball team. They're a really bad lineup. They create runs 60 some odd % worse than average. They're going up against a great pitcher today. So I can't really advocate for it strongly, but they've got a 3% total team ownership share. So an eighth of what the other team on the opposite side at the same ballpark is going off at. There's upside in that if you're just trying to buy into the ballpark. So it depends on how it's put together, but the Padres just become extremely difficult to roster and to put together in any unique ways, even on a slate like this where we've got a bunch of different pitching options from the mid-range at the same pricing to pivot between. It gets it a little bit easier to build unique lineups that way, but still, if you're going to the more likely guys, you're going to be building very familiar lineups to what other people are.
All right, so here's your challenge tonight, okay? And it's a very simple one, right? Your task, should you accept it, if I should paraphrase movies for you, just to bring you right back into our realm here, is over the 15 games to really use discernment of time as best as possible, because there's going to be one or probably more, I would imagine, games on the slate that you're going to look back at me and say, Shander, seriously? Do we really need to talk about this game? It's bullshit. Let's move on. So I don't want you to hold back, all right? Even if I'm not done mentioning the game. Hey, Pittsburgh's at what? No, jump in, Terry, and say, let's move on. I think we can get some value from the first game, but I'm just saying in general, there may be a stinker or two that we can use. And here's the beauty of it, okay? The beauty of it is the more games you redline, the more I can work in a Simpsons reference or some other reference on something I can work in that's just going to go down a rabbit hole. So that's all I'm saying. We can start with Pittsburgh at Washington, but I don't want you to be afraid.
Field and I stepped on you there. Sorry, I was going to yell out Stack Field and Trevor Rogers, and we'll talk about the Simpsons for the next 45 minutes.
There you go. See, if Max were here, we could, because he's
show over.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
There you go.
Washington hosting Pittsburgh.
Yeah, this one, I'm not really on either one of these pitchers. You're talking about two lefties who are not pitching on, for Patrick Corbin's case, not pitching to former form, 17.6% strikeout rate, 4.49 xFIP on the season. Tyler Anderson, kind of never has reached any kind of playable peaks for us, 21.6% strikeout rate, 4.33 xFIP. He's capable of keeping the ball in the park and on the ground. He's somewhat suppressing the opposing home run numbers in my home run model. But this one would be, if I'm choosing sides about the Nationals bats for me, I think you can roster them 1 through 4 is a decent stack, and then you're getting into, the Josh Harrison territory, but you can bounce right back with Yan Gomes, who can shine against the lefty. I like Victor Robles still with his speed combo, and his on-base is gradually improving down the bottom of the lineup. He's up to a 345 on-base percentage, so he's a little bit above average now. 7 stolen bases on the year, just blazing fast kid. So if he gets on, he makes for a serviceable wraparound back up to the Schwarber, Turner, Soto, and Zimmerman stack. I don't love it. They're not one of my primary spots on the board, but that's where I would be in this game. Otherwise, not too much on the table. If you want to roster shares of some of the Pirates, I have no real argument with it other than, as a team, as a unit, the numbers certainly haven't been there through the season against either hand this year. The one thing they do is not strike out very much, but currently creating runs 16% worse than average as a team against lefties, 2.64% home run rate. Some of the bats in there, like if you're going to it, just go to the obvious names at the top. It's not that difficult. Kevin Newman, Brian Hayes, Brian Reynolds, one of Jacob Stallings or Gregory Polanco to round it out. Probably better off with a 3-man from the top, though.
Yeah, I guess from the standpoint of the pitching, absolutely. The stack is right there with Washington. I don't know. I guess that would be it as far as just identifying a cheaper option for Pittsburgh if you were just trying to pivot off of high ownership for one-offs, and that would really be the path to a Pirate, I think, tonight, right?
Yeah, for sure. There are, like I said, there are some good bats in that lineup as just to grab a guy if you need at that salary. Like, I really like Brian Reynolds in general as a hitter. He's only 2,800 on FanDuel. So if you need a plug and play one-off outfielder with some power potential, with some upside, not in a bad matchup, hitting third in his lineup, that's fine. I can definitely see getting to him at 20. If I've got 2,800 to spend, he'd be one of the more likely guys. not looking at the entire board at the same time right now, but he'd be in the mix of guys that we click on. He's up around 10% ownership and costs 3,200 on DK. So maybe not quite as strong just based on if 10% of the field are on him. Maybe there's a better option for that price, but certainly a very good hitter. Brian Hayes, big time up and coming prospect of a kid. Hasn't done a ton yet, but has 3 home runs in his 51 plate appearances. Excellent triple slash. So he's in play as well.
All right, on the super chat. Now, first off, as far as Justin Bruce, I don't necessarily know the depths in which we go here, but I can imagine that if we don't already have somebody working on content for League of Legends, it's not going to be difficult for Alex to track somebody down in that world who's an expert, as he has already with you and so many others across the board. So I don't think that we have LOL shows, right? Is that accurate here? We probably could be working
shows
on
it. Not since the height of the pandemic. I don't think we've had shows dedicated to it, but we certainly do have esports content, leading esports projections. Check it out on the site. People crush it with that. EMAC wins all the time. We talk on the side about how neither of us has any idea what's happening when we try and watch on the screen, but he crushes it with our projections. He just grabs the projections and runs with it. So
amazing.
Yeah, definitely leading content up there.
And look, that's the best advertisement we could have that's natural here, which is just plug and play. I did a show with Alex over the weekend, and he just followed our soccer projections, plug and play, clears 100K on a soccer tournament. He's even admitting it. Like, I had no idea what the hell was going on. It's amazing. You just do whatever we have on here. Just follow it.
The way I heard it was he had an alarm set so that he could change that lineup, forgot what the alarm meant, stumbled into winning 100K. Not bad, boss.
Not bad at all. Now, Soul Dope 1234, thoughts on Sammy Long on FanDuel to fit big bats. I know we're going to move around game by game, but we will address the super chats as they come as well. Big part of what we do here. So we appreciate, we'll give back. We don't ask much. Hit us up with a like. Make sure you're subscribed as well. And we'll tell you all about No House Advantage and more on the show today. But just as far as that specific question, Terry, any thoughts for Soul Dope?
Who are we asking about?
Sammy Long.
That's not – who is that?
I don't know. Forget that. That's fine. We'll move on.
I don't have a Sammy Long on my –
I did see Ryan Stubbs, though, try and bait us. I'm sorry?
No, go ahead. I'm just trying to figure out who the hell that is.
That's fine. I did see Ryan Stubbs try and bait us into a movie rabbit hole here. If you build it, they will come. The best baseball movie line ever. Now, you could expand that into, is it the best sports movie line ever?
Ooh, wow. I mean, that's an all-time classic. I don't know if it even holds up for baseball as best ever, though. Say again?
Sammy Long, I think he was asking about the Giants tonight, but I don't think I don't know if he's starting.
I have Zach Littell going for the Giants.
Yeah.
And Alex Young is the opposing pitcher for the Diamondbacks. Was this kid originally the Diamondbacks pitcher? I don't even know which one of these teams he's on, but he's not pitching in that game.
No, not tonight. Okay. Yeah, you're right. We do have Littell tonight, so that's fine. So don't even worry about it.
Yeah, I have Zach Littell going in that game, so that's why he was not in my head.
Yeah, so that's why I was saying as far as tonight is concerned. Now, here's the thing. We're going to get into the Yankees and Toronto, but I just want to leave you with this one thought, all right? You may run like Mays, but you hit like shit. That might be, for me at least, the all-timer right there, all right?
Phenomenal line. Love it. Absolutely. Yeah, baseball. I mean, there are so many good baseball movie lines you could grab from The Sandlot, The Great Bambino. I mean, come on. There's all kinds of good stuff.
That works. All right, let's look at the pitching matchup. A little difference as far as cost is concerned with Toronto and the Yankees here. Montgomery would definitely be a lower cost P2 option. Not sure how you see with Ryu there, but are you looking at all in any interest here on the mound before we look at the bats?
Sorry.
Toronto and New York. Sorry.
Catch up on that. Toronto and New York, yeah. So no extreme interest in either one of the pitchers. Ryu is a on and off again quality guy. Montgomery's having a nice season, but both of them are league average-ish, and they're running into pretty high-end offenses on both sides who handle left-handed pitching pretty well on both sides. So I don't really love the idea of getting to either pitcher. If I was going to go there, I would probably land on Ryu, just a little bit more strikeout upside, I think. A little bit higher of a projection from him in my personal projections here. Taking a look, Yanks are sitting at a 23.1% strikeout rate for the season against left-handed pitching. So that's actually 13th in the league. So they're around average, slightly better than. Creating runs 1% worse than average. 4.19% home run rate in the split. So it's not like it's safe. Toronto on the other side, 22.7% home run rate, creating runs 7% better than average, 22.7% strikeout rate rather, 4.18 home run rate. Neither one of these guys is in a good spot. Both of them might be hurting more than people would expect to find the strikeouts. So this one would be about the bats more for me, particularly playing up. It's not the Dunedin Stadium anymore now that they're up in Buffalo, but it's still not a major league ballpark to play in either. So that just lends itself to the bats as well.
Yeah, both are pretty much projected in our top tier, if you will, top third tier for stack percentage tonight. Now, clearly, everything in San Diego is going to be completely dominant in our top stacks tool. $29.95 a week, Awesemo Plus, amazingly cheap, affordable. You can get in everything. It's not just for MLB DFS, it's for everything across the board. But just looking at the top stacks tool, knowing that that's a huge key here for just trying to figure out, navigate as ownership as well. Clearly San Diego, from the percentage to the ownership across the board. But even as far as what stands out to me, it's almost like you can have your pick, Terry. If you were looking for the one of the top projected stacks that's the lowest owned, it appears to be between New York and Toronto. So I wonder if you have a favorite between those two with the pitching matchup and the backdrop you just laid out.
They're very close on my board in terms of the overall upside. It looks like they're very close on the top stacks board, like you were saying there as well. They're both pulling a little bit of positive leverage. The Yankees pulling a little bit more, but I think we can maybe, depending on what you're putting into it, maybe you can get away with a little bit lower cost. Well, that's not even really true on Fanduel. It's going to be pretty much lower cost as well for the Yankees. So yeah, I would say, I hate to sound like a homer, but I think I would go into the Yankee stack, which maybe doesn't quite align with the fact that I said if I was picking a pitcher, it would be Ryu. But I think it makes sense. The Yanks have a little bit more ownership room and certainly very low cost. You're still getting a bat like Gary Sanchez and his power at 2,600. Miguel Andujar, who's been smoking the ball since he came back up at 2,600, multi-position eligibility in the 6 and 7 spots. I'm still not very fond of Gio Urshela hitting in the middle of the lineup, but what can you do? 266, 310, 425 with a 159 ISO, 7 home runs and 229 plate appearances. He's playable. He's cheap. And then you've got the mashers up top. So Aaron Judge is in the lineup. There was a question about that. He's got a little bit of I think it was a back that was acting up on him. But if he's in the lineup, I'm not worried about it. So nice home run upside on Judge and Stanton. Wouldn't leave Gleyber Torres out of a stack for 2,800. Love the upside for the kid still, even though he's struggled to hit for power this year. And DJ LeMahieu scratched out a few hits recently, is maybe hopefully rounding into form a little bit. The WRC plus hopefully trending back north, the on base percentage and all of that. So yeah, Yankee stacks for me, but I would definitely get to both sides of this one. Definitely drawing some nice power marks, like I said, against the lefty with Toronto here, getting from Semien down to at least Lourdes Gurriel in the 6th spot. Absolutely love it. If you're leaving out the bottom 3 and worried about the lineup turning over, yeah, so am I a little bit with Joe Panic, Riley Adams, and Santiago Espinal down there. But I think it's definitely playable up on the top end, and I don't think that's going to hurt them too much to make the top end unplayable, just given that's the part of the lineup that's prone to hitting a couple 3-run home runs and really just exploding without the bottom of the lineup. So I think you're good there.
Yeah, workable numbers, at least for one-offs for the Yankees. Both lineups projected at 5 here on our lineup builder. So there's a decent shot at that. Even on the other end with Toronto, you're under 5K for Vlad on FanDuel and just over 4K for Bichette. So definitely workable as far as if you're not going to stack the two. So let's move on. And look, to be fair, if you came on and said the Yankees are going to win the World Series, I'd accuse you of being a homer. I think you picking Ryu tonight or the Yankee stack over Toronto does not make you a homer by any means, just to clarify.
All right. So, I always like to, come on wearing the Yankees hat and everything. So I don't want to be that guy, particularly with the way that this team sucked with sequential hitting and everything this year. I'm concerned about my Yanks, and I am certainly not calling a World Series at this point.
By no means. All right, now let's flip here to the other New York team hosting the Cubs and trying to find some value in Mills as a P2 and maybe even working Walker in, depending on ownership, how confident you are on the Mets starter to kind of limit or shut down Chicago. Neither one of these teams projected for 5 runs. Even the total here would reflect that as well. So let's start, I guess, if there's any value with Mills as a P2 pivot, or even if you're interested in building Walker as either a P1 pivot or a P2 out there.
Yeah, for me, it would be on the Walker side of things. He actually projects fairly well for me in my model here. There's certainly strikeouts available in that Chicago lineup against a righty. So I would be looking to conservative shares there, because the other thing that Chicago does against right-handed pitching is tattoo them for a 4.24% home run rate. That's third or fourth best in the league. I don't have it sorted by that column right now, but they've hit 65 total home runs against righties, have a 181 team ISO. I do like the 25.1% strikeouts. That's tied for 8th in baseball. So there is definitely upside for a kid who's pitching fairly well, Taijuan Walker, so far this year. 24.9% strikeout rate, 4.07 xFIP, and a 1.03 whip. With a 10% walk rate, a 1.03 whip is pretty good for a pitcher who throws the way that Walker does. 9.4% swinging strikes is lower than you'd like to see, but he's got a 29.5% CSW that's pretty solid. And if he was able to pick up the swinging strike rate by just a little bit, this would be a really high-end pitcher all of a sudden. So I'm curious to see what Walker does with the rest of his year. I think for 8,000 on FanDuel, 8,800 on DK, he makes an interesting pivot point with not that much ownership tracking to him. More on DK, but you have more room to work over on DraftKings as well, of course. So I would get to some shares of Walker, particularly where I'm rostering 2 pitchers and I've just got more operating space. But he's in the mix for grabbing at least some shares as I try and spread out on this weird oddball slate where a lot of pitching is just the same. Very similar to yesterday in that regard. It's not without maybe the 2 premium guys up top.
Right. And it may even be worse, right, than yesterday.
Yeah, exactly.
Board. So that's good. It gets you prepared for a day. It's almost like preparation for today. Now, we have them both projected super low. I mean, just looking at the Cubs, they are right there at the bottom from value as what you can get from a stack. They're not going to be owned by pretty much anybody, so maybe there's some advantage there. I think it would be more about how confident you are on the Mets bouncing up from also being projected as a pretty low stack, and maybe if there's a one-off or two that you could take advantage of from a cost standpoint on the Cubs, because I imagine that just based on projections, you're going to stay away from Chicago's stack.
Yeah, so it's interesting just if you're looking at the top stacks board. When we talk about today's board, we've got so much of the probability of being the top stack going into San Diego, and then like everybody else is the same. I know the Mets are way down the board. Probably, if I'm not counting it, but it looks like it's more than halfway by just a little bit.
Yeah.
But they're 2.4% probable of being the top stack. The number 2 team on the board is under 5%. So, I mean, everybody's the same today. It's not that they're the same, right? It's not that I'm saying the Mets and the Red Sox have an identical chance, but I'm saying when things are that tightly packed, I kind of tend to ignore where they fall on the board, and I start looking into what's the total team ownership share, what's the leverage look like, and where can I push and pull against where the slate is going to be, just in that, if I'm considering a lot of these teams to be roughly equivalent. And I'm willing to, on a slate like today where there's a lot of bad pitching going, it's going to be a very variable slate. So we're going to want to spread out, grab a wide range of outcomes on this one. So I'm willing to consider teams like the Mets as maybe not quite the Red Sox or maybe the Twins or Cincinnati today, but certainly if I'm looking at like Cleveland on the board, I'm considering the Mets basically even with that, probably around like the New York and Toronto level, Washington as well. All of those teams are one big group for me. So I'm going to just try and distribute a lot of different shares. Mets are definitely on that board. They're low cost on both sites. I love the top 3 pricing. VR, Lindor, Dom Smith for right around 4,000 coming off the top on the DK slate there. Makes them easy to put together with some quality hitters in that stack and some guys who do interesting things for DFS purposes in Johnny VR between the power and the speed. Put those guys ahead of the thumpers in that lineup, and I think you got something working.
As you hear Terry mentioning the top stack tool, we have so many things available to you today, free, the MLB player rankings. You could also get in on the NBA player rankings and the PGA golfer rankings. A lot of things happening in the NBA playoffs, that one big game tonight, of course, getting ready for the U.S. Open. So you want to take advantage of everything we have, $29.95 a week. Now, for new members of Awesemo Plus Platinum, we have this code for you, 15% off your first week. All you need to do is use our code MLB Deeper Dive. It's all one word. It's all caps. It's the name of this show. Use that at checkout, and you'll get 15% off Awesemo Plus Platinum, and then you can really take full advantage of every single small thing we have here. The $29.95 for Awesemo Plus is just an insane value to get you working here on everything we have on the site, as far as from optimizers to lineup builders to crunchers to just access to the stacks and other rankings that you don't have to wait one day a week for. You mentioned Cleveland, Terry, and home of course, Major League, where I had to reference why can't I remember his name? Tire World.
Lou Brown.
Why can't I remember
Lou Brown?
Lou Brown. Thank you. One of the top 3.
Let me call you back. I got a guy on the other line about some white walls.
Exactly. Top 3 managers, coaches in any sports movie across the board. It's got to be Lou Brown, right? I know people are going to go on all these football movies, Denzel, no. Lou Brown's got to be top 3. All right. But let's just look at Cleveland.
Absolutely.
He has to be, right?
Absolutely. You can keep your Coach Carters and your Boilermakers or Buttermakers from the Bad News Bears. He'd probably be number 2 on my list.
Well, yeah, he's really good.
Similar managerial styles and similar ragtag to prominence kind of stories.
Well, what about Paul Newman, though? We can't forget him, right? Slapshot?
Oh, God. All-time classic. I'd say 85% of our audience has probably never seen Slapshot and would probably look at it weirdly right
They're
now.
probably like,
I bet
how
Tyler
dare you
Zander behind the scenes has.
Well, Tyler's seen everything. But it's like, I'm sure there are people on the chat. How dare you leave off Henry Winkler from The Water Boy? So we get it. It's to each their own, by all means. All right. Well, I have another one, too. And Tom Hanks, there's no crying in baseball. Not only does he go down as one of the best manager coaches of all time, maybe not top 3, but definitely worth a mention. He also has one of the most famous lines in a sports movie. There's no crying in baseball.
That's very true. Yeah, that's another all-timer. It's a classic. It's become a classic baseball line to the point where it's not even associated with the movie to a lot of people anymore.
It's amazing, right?
It's just like a baseball thing now. Yeah. Yep. That's a great movie, too.
It really is. It's such an underrated movie, and it's been forgotten for some reason. Who's going to be crying first tonight? Is it going to be Quantrill or Matt Harvey on the mound?
Yeah, this is
just to stay the hell away, right?
I think so. I mean, Harvey's been throwing the ball 96, but he hasn't done anything with it. And he was talking about that in the media the other day. He's all pissed off about not pitching well. So pitch better, Matt Harvey. Your stuff is there, according to you. 18.1% strikeout rate, 4.70 xFIP, and getting worse on the season. No thanks. Cal Quantrill's going to be a good pitcher one day. He's going up against the Orioles. It's not the greatest offense in baseball. There are certainly strikeouts on the table. I don't expect much length. I don't get a great projection from him. If he managed to give you 5 serviceable innings, I wouldn't be completely shocked against this team. And he's super cheap, but I don't think I'm going there. I just don't think it's time yet. Maybe sometime in the future. He's like my bottom ranked by projection pitcher on the board. But I do believe in the talent one day.
Well, what about Cleveland? They're projected. We have them projected over 5 runs here on our lineup builder, and Matt Harvey on the mound. Clearly, an opportunity to victimize him. Cleveland, we actually have as a pretty decent return as far as the overall value on the stack. May not be as high or kind of right there as you mentioned in that top crew with Boston, Minnesota, which we'll get to, Cincinnati as well. We mentioned the Yankees, and there's Cleveland. Cleveland actually has the most ownership right now, projected ownership, nearly double, Terry, to what the Red Sox in Minnesota has. So if all things are equal, my outside eye would say, yeah, you're going to get a good return on the Cleveland stack, but this seems to be the favorite out there for everybody outside of San Diego.
Yeah, looks like a good amount of people are going to it. I think it'll be drawn in by the optimizers as well because they're decent value from one of the higher ranked teams. So anytime we see the value score increase, it means that the optimizers are going to start pulling them in. And I think that the spot makes sense. It's a spot where a lot of people who are just putting their lineups in by hand on the bus on the way home are putting in, seeing Matt Harvey and saying, oh, let me target Matt Harvey. I know to do that, so let me put in some Indians. I really want to see where the final run total in this game settles. We've got a ton of wind blowing directly in from center, which could have an impact. It's not something that I make adjustments for, and people ask about this all the time. When you see wind, or when you're worried about an external factor like that, something quantifiable, or at least something unquantifiable for us but professionally quantifiable for Vegas, let Vegas worry about it. So that's where that's when I say I want to see the run total. That's what I put into my model that takes care of things like wind and things like weather. So I'm really curious to see where that ends up. If it cuts into the overall run total severely, I'm happy to leave the field behind on that one. Like if the Indians drop below 5, I'm definitely happy to leave the field on that one. I think maybe there's an argument to be made that the Orioles are a little underowned and sneaky, but they'd be dealing with that same thing, and you'd be dealing into the worst offense in the game. So for me right now, it's a stay away. Not fully, like I'm not taking the Indians out of my pool, but I'm definitely not looking to push with that much ownership on them until I know a little bit better what the runs are going to look like.
Yeah, Odd Shopper has it right now, depending on where you want to go, over 8.5, under 9. But again, looking at the books compared to where we have it on the projected runs, it's pretty much Cleveland. The anticipation, at least, is Cleveland's going to do the majority of the work, if not all the work. So there is that risk with Baltimore, but I totally understand as far as that wait and see approach. Moving to the next game here, where there's going to be a little bit more opportunity to maneuver now with a pitcher, I think, for the first time. And just looking at a bunch of FanDuel crunches, Terry, Eduardo Rodriguez is coming up really high. I know you, Darvish, is and Mike Minor you mentioned, but even in Draftkings as well, he's slotted in across the board for a lot of my lineups here as the P2. I mean, Mike Minor, you, Darvish, how people want to maneuver with that, we'll get to both of them. But at least now it seems like we've hit one of the first guys that at least our projections on site have as a pretty smart or safe play as a P2 at least.
You know who has the league leading home run rate against left-handed pitching by 0.3 percentage point?
The Atlanta Braves.
How did I know? 4.97% home run rate this season as a team against left-handed pitching. 201 ISO against left-handed pitching active roster. The only team in baseball over 200 against either hand currently. The Braves against lefties are currently the most hard-hitting, best offense in baseball. This is not a spot for me for Eduardo Rodriguez. He projects okay on my FanDuel board, but by okay, I mean he's in a group of 10, 12 other guys with 10, 12 of them above him. He would be the bottom probably of playable starters for me, but if he's drawing weight and he is on FanDuel around 15%, I'm going to be away from it, even for 6,400. It's just not a spot for me. I'm going to go to the Braves offense a little bit here in the hopes that people don't catch up with it. Acuna is drawing a lot of ownership. Ozzie Albies is drawing some, but people are leaving Austin Riley on the table. They're leaving Dansby Swanson on the table. Freddie Freeman, I have no issues in the world with going lefty-lefty with Freddie Freeman. I don't love the bottom of the lineup. The last 3 hitters, Abraham Almonte, William Contreras, and Guillermo Heredia. But I think it's definitely a spot to go to offenses on both sides of this one. The little placeholder that I hand built was actually a game stack of this game, just because you can get all the hitters with a really cheap, stupid pitcher if you're willing to do it, which I'll probably change that by the time we lock.
Now, we don't have them higher than 5 flat for Boston. Atlanta just under that number of a projection. Is there any concern? I mean, look, you laid out the numbers right there, and I saw in the chat people echoing it, smashing the Atlanta stack, taking advantage of Rodriguez on the road.
Red Sox too.
Red Sox on the other side, right? I mean, there's no way you're getting to Tucker Davidson then at this point if you're not going to get to Rodriguez, I imagine.
Yeah, very, very much so. Also pitching in a warming Atlanta stadium, which is already a hitter's park, and it will become more so as the weather warms. Humid day down there, all just good offensive indicators for that. Definitely would not be getting Tucker Davidson. He's a decent prospect. 17 2/3 innings, 20% strikeout rate, 4.23 xFIP, fire away with Red Sox bats, profiling very nicely for power, up and down the lineup. If you want hitter by hitter on the Sox, I wrote about him in my article, which is free on the site.
Yeah, and just to put it in perspective, back to the book, and again, Odd Shopper, where we go, it's the only place to go. We use it here on every show. We use it in real life for betting, for everything that you need. All the work is done for you. Now we're going to take the obvious one in Coors out of the picture here, but it's just moved now at 9.5 across the board as the consistent number 2 highest total, and it's going back and forth with that Yankees Blue Jays game, as we talked about the two pitchers there and the advantages of both stacks. So reinforced by the book, Terry, that a lot of runs are expected to be scored down in Atlanta. It's hitting season down there. They don't have much to look forward to, all right? Their basketball team's about to be eliminated. Give them a little bit of space, all right? Just as far as that's concerned.
Yeah,
now, sorry.
Thanks on behalf of the Knicks for getting those Hawks out of there. That's
not over yet. All right, it's not over yet.
Yeah. All over with the crying.
All right, exactly right. Okay, so Cincinnati at Milwaukee. Again, I don't know if on this slate, especially on DraftKings, if you're working to get to Luis Castillo, the numbers, at least on the surface, may not be worth the $8K in return. And then you have a really super low cost in Brett Anderson. So this, again, kind of looking in the backdrop of where we have stacks up here, the Reds are projected outside of San Diego. I'll keep having to say that because San Diego is by far and away the number one projected stack by a mile. I really think it might be a mile. But outside of that, we're starting to find some maneuverability. Cincinnati not dominated, at least by ownership, and right there, Terry, projected at the top. So with that said, I imagine Brett Anderson becomes a fade, and I don't know how much you're willing to get to an 8K Luis Castillo.
I am probably going to have too much Luis Castillo in my life. So
too much.
If you want to avoid my lineups out there, if you want to avoid my lineups, avoid me and my 7,300 Luis Castillo shares because I'll probably have too much. He's projecting well for me. He's struggled through this season, no question, down to a 20.4% strikeout rate. He was cruising up around 30.5% last year, 28.9% the year before in 2019. He's down from a 15.4% strikeout rate all the way to swinging strike rate all the way down to 11.4%. Took his CSW down from 29.4 to 26.5. He's avoided premium contact though, 74th percentile average exit velo against, 66th percentile hard hit rate, 80th percentile barrel rate, 80th percentile chase rate. So he's inducing chases. He's just not finishing hitters. So the strikeouts were maybe creeping back in around the edges. He's suffering from a 335 BABIP against, but last year he was 329 and he was excellent. So that's not really, I can't put my finger on that and say this is what's killing a lot of his numbers. He's the Reds as a whole. This isn't really a product of him, but his strand rate has fallen from 70% to 55.2%. So there's bad luck baked in here between the base hits and some of the runners that reach base ending up scoring. A lot of that ends up on the defense rather than the pitcher when we break things down. So he's struggling from some of that, but there's other stuff that's underlying here. But he is facing a Brewers team that strikes out 26.1% of the time. They're fifth worst in baseball. They have a 3.41 home run rate against righties, which is around the middle of the league, but they create runs 16% worse than average on the season as a unit. It could be a get right spot, and he's still projecting well for me, and he's cheap, and there's nothing else on the board. I'll have some Luis Castillo. I hope I didn't sell too many people too hard into him because he's not been pitching well. He wouldn't surprise me if he had either a total disaster of a game or a very good game here. That's how volatile a play it is.
But you're clearly overweight. You're underweight to Rodriguez to the field, but overweight to Castillo to the field. Is that accurate?
That is accurate indeed.
Okay.
So when the Brewers tattoo him, you guys can find me at the bottom of standings tonight.
Fair enough. Now, on the flip side, make sure you go out and congratulate Terry. We want to see you. Hit him up on Twitter and tag him at DigitalB21 and say, thank you, sir, for the advice. I was going to fade Castillo, but I won 100K as a result of it. So there's always the positive and negative. We want to make sure that you get the props there as well. Now, as far as one-offs are concerned, anybody specifically, I see Aquino's coming up here as far as a possible option in the outfield for Cincinnati. You can get to him clearly as a cheaper number, but is there anybody that you look at kind of on either side if you were not going to stack and try and get away with a workable number for a one-off?
If I'm not going to stack, looking at the Reds confirmed lineup, Aquino hitting second today. The price is right, but ownership is there on him now. It's not going to sneak past anybody today. 20% plus on Fanduel, 20% plus on DK. That's one I would probably try and find another low-cost pivot for. Not necessarily one in this lineup, but if I'm grabbing one-offs from this lineup, I do like pretty much everybody else who is not drawing the ownership. So I'd be looking as like pay up options as one-offs, like a Nick Castellanos. Definitely Joey Votto would be in play for 3,000 on FanDuel, 4,500 and no ownership on DK. Not that expensive. Eugenio Suarez, also not that expensive, 3,100, 4,700. Again, no ownership, multi-position on FanDuel. So those are the guys I like to try and grab, guys with big time home run upside, guys who are not getting the ownership that they warrant. That said, I'll probably be stacking these Reds today against Brett Anderson. I do like the spot. I hate that we lose Jesse Winker out of this stack, but I think there's still premium quality here. So I'll probably have some Reds today.
All right, now we move to Shane McClanahan being that higher cost option. Dallas Keuchel, the other guy in the matchup here is Tampa's in Chicago. White Sox right down at the bottom. Now, again, we do have this big meat of teams that are all projected from a 4.9% top stack to 1.3 at the bottom. And it's not a gigantic difference by any means when you look at who's up there at the top in San Diego. But it is worth noting the White Sox are pretty much right down there at the bottom. So I'm not sure if you're looking at maybe taking advantage of that with Dallas Keuchel. On the flip side, Tampa's kind of stacked there in the middle. So either one of these pitchers, especially knowing that you're going to go over 8K for McClanahan.
Yeah, if I'm going to either one of the pitchers, it would probably be the Keuchel side. He's a guy that I'll take some random shots with here and there, and there are certainly strikeouts on the table for him. 28% strikeout rate for Tampa Bay this season, third worst in baseball against left-handed pitching, creating runs 8% worse than average, 2.94% home run rate against lefties, only a 137 team ISO. They do most of their damage against right-handed pitching, so that's a spot where I'll take shots. And I think if anybody out there is planning on stacking the Rays, I certainly would be worried about that. Just going up against Keuchel, not a guy that you want to be stacking against all that frequently. He's not a big-time strikeout pitcher by any means, 13.6% strikeout rate. That feels low even for him. I don't have his historically in front of me right now, but he's a very low-end strikeout guy, but he keeps the ball on the ground. He keeps the ball in the yard by and large, and he really suppresses power and offense the other way. So I wouldn't look to stack really any Rays. I don't know that I'd be really grabbing one-offs. Like Randy Arozarena doesn't have his home run upside that he normally would provide for you today, and he's still priced like he does. So I don't think you're getting much value there. Could they connect? Sure. I'm not saying they can't, but it's not a spot for me. If I'm going to anything here, it's probably White Sox bats going up against Shane McClanahan. Just grab some of the low ownership on some of these quality names, quality bats that I like. I'm always willing to do that. It won't be a massive share, but I would make a point of maybe having some of what I consider a premium offense, maybe not in the best spot. But if you consider McClanahan maybe not long for the game, then you can get into some good conversation around guys like Brian Goodwin, guys like Yermin Mercedes, Andrew Vaughn, the sneaky guys on the back end, plus all the obvious guys, the Timmy Andersons, Yasmani Grandals, and Jose Abreu's of the world.
Yeah, all under FanDuel at least, all under the 4K. Grandal, you mentioned 3K, so these guys are not going to be expensive by any means. It's just about working ownership and seeing how many other people are taking advantage of those low-cost bats as far as one-offs are concerned. So it makes sense as far as trying to maneuver throughout. All right, now we're in Houston, and I have one that I'm going to throw at you specifically here when we flip to the bats, because I'm curious if it's a wager worth placing. The return that I see on Odd Chopper was one that was too much to at least ignore. So we're going to mine you not only for DFS advice, but for betting advice as well. But let's start on the mound here. And again, we're trying to find the variance, right? We're trying to find where we can be different on the mound, knowing that there aren't super obvious options like even we saw last night where there might be one or two at the top of the slate. So again, we approach this big picture slate with this matchup here, Texas and Houston. And again, I don't know if either one of these guys is going to jump out at you, especially, paying the 7,500 low end cost for Kyle Gibson, or on the flip side with Houston, even less. It doesn't seem like, based on what you've been saying, that you would be getting to a lot of these guys unless you can slide them in as a P2.
Yeah, and if I could, it would. I don't even want to do it. Actually, I would be off of pitchers here unless you're trying to go with Jake Odorizzi coming in as a $6,100 bulk reliever and expecting him to strike out some of these Rangers. I could maybe get behind that narrative as like a super cheap guy. 7,000 on DK. I don't think even that makes it work. It's not like he's priced like a reliever the way they do over there. But it could be a sneaky approach on FanDuel, just given all the strikeout upside against righties in the Rangers lineup. but it's not a smart play because he's not going to have the quality start bonus. He's less likely at least to have the win bonus coming in that spot. This would most definitely be more about the bats. The Astros excellent against both hands, so I would get to some Astros stacks here. Doesn't look like they're overly owned on either site. They're priced up as usual though, so they're just difficult to build with, but that helps suppress the ownership. Gibson pitching well, only a 20.5% strikeout rate though, 3.98 xFIP, 1.0 WHIP. 12.2% in induced swinging strikes. So he pounds the zone a decent amount with a 29.5% CSW rate, but just a lot of balls in play. And against this team, that could be pretty deadly. So I'd be looking to stack Astros here. If you want to grab some power one-offs from the Rangers side, I don't mind that. I'm thinking about Joey Gallo, some of that left-handed power. You're getting a half of a Lance McCullers and then Jake Odorizzi. So there's certainly upside for the left-handed power from the Rangers side of things in Joey Gallo, Willie Calhoun. It's not the greatest lineup in the world, so maybe those are the only names. Nate Lowe is in there too. But yeah, I don't know that I'm stacking these Rangers. I just don't believe in the lineup that much.
I could get right now, Odd Shopper has it plus 560. Now we'll get your home run pick before we get out of here. So I can't imagine I'm stepping on your toes with Jose Altuve, but at plus 560 in the 2-hole tonight, you mentioned the interest in stacking, if anything, on that side. Plus 560 is a hell of a return for a guy hitting in the lineup high with an opportunity.
What's that, plus 560 to hit a home run?
Yeah.
I don't mind that. I got him at I got him at a 6.45. So like I consider 5 is around like average-ish, and then 10.
Yeah.
If you're over 10, you've got a good shot. So I've got him a little bit above the average in terms of the upside. So I don't hate it.
Okay. Now we have 7 games to get to in 11 minutes.
No
I have a radio show in 11 minutes. Live before lock is in 11 minutes. So I don't know how long we can extend this thing. You and I are going to make it happen. All right. We're going to make this thing happen. You ready?
No problem. We can talk fast. We got this.
Mike Minor. We finally got to him. Okay. Detroit's in Kansas City. Mike Minor, 9,200. Even maybe a sneaky play with Casey Mize. Let's start with the pitching and you could transition to the bats.
Sure. Yeah. Minor, like I said at the top of the show, leading the slate in terms of probability of success. He's in a great spot going up against an awful Tigers lineup. Let's see. He is sitting 11.2% induced swinging strikes at 28.3% CSW. Got him a little bit around average, 4.06 xFIP on the season, 1.15 WHIP over 13 starts. Gives you reliable depth, 74 innings, 26.6% strikeout rate. So good depth, good potential for strikeouts. Facing an offense with a 2.67 home run rate and a 133 ISO and a league second worst, 29.1% strikeout rate against lefties. It's a good spot for Mike Minor. That said, we are talking about a fairly priced up Mike Minor here. We're not talking about one of the premium arms in all of baseball. So it's a better spot than it is a pitcher. I would maybe consider rostering some hedge stacks coming back the other way with some of these Tigers. They got a little frisky last night. There's potential for that. They're not good. I would not do it and get carried away with it, but a few shares maybe. But yeah, I would have some Minor. I'll probably come in under the field just because, again, I want to spread out on this slate. But if the field's at like 18, 20% and I'm at 12 to 15%, I'm fine with that.
All right. Now, on the flip side, no way you're going to stack anything Detroit related against Minor, right?
Yeah, it would just, like I was saying, it would just be maybe one or two hedge stacks. And that would be more in the case if I was pushing over the field's ownership on this. I don't think it's even necessary if you're going to undercut the field. And then I would consider throwing some Royals back against Casey Mize. I don't hate the idea of getting to him as a value, 7,100 on DK. He projects okay enough to support that for me, but I don't love the spot going up against the Royals for him here either. 8,200, he's basically off the board for me on FanDuel.
Trevor Rogers now 10K, another super high cost guy. So we already get to Minor in the previous game, higher cost at least, but I don't know. Are you going to get to Rogers much? And do you anticipate getting more Minor, also knowing that he's going to be pretty high owned?
Yeah, I like Rogers a lot. It's a tough spot, though. Facing St. Louis, 22.1% strikeout rate is ninth best in baseball against lefties. 191 team ISO, 33.81% home run rate is around league average. but they've got some titanic power on the right side of the plate. So I'd be a little bit concerned about the kid, but he's pitching great. 29.8% strikeout rate over his first 75 and 2/3 innings in 13 starts this year. He pitched 28 innings last year, but we don't really worry too much about that. So this is basically his major league debut. 3.34 xFIP, a 1.06 WHIP, 15% swinging strike rate. Kid is excellent. He projects really well for me. I'm going to have some shares even at the high price, even with a lineup I like going against him the other way. This is a spot where I will probably consider, since I'm paying so much for him, grabbing some Cardinals hedge stacks though coming the other way, especially with nobody on him on the FanDuel slate. So definitely give me some Trevor Rogers and give me some shares of the Cards as well.
Yu Darvish popping up a lot on a lot of crunches here. Of course, the difficulty is balancing that out of where he's pitching tonight. Clearly, San Diego, everybody's in love with San Diego right through us on the site as far as top stack is concerned by an absolute mile here. But Darvish, on the other hand, can you get to him knowing that the matchup maybe isn't as difficult so much as just the ballpark?
Yeah, any other ballpark in baseball, this is your clear-cut number one spot. He'd be projecting 10, 15 points better than most of the entire slate. He's going up against the team with a collective WRC plus of 67, meaning they're 33% worse than average at creating runs in the split. They've got a 136 team ISO at 2.53% home run rate. They strike out around the average 24.4, which is their claim to fame against righties, which is still not very good. It's a cake matchup for him, except for the Coors Field factor. I think if nobody's going to be going to him, he makes an interesting, sneaky little spot there. 9,000, I'm willing to pay that to get to Yu Darvish against a terrible baseball team and just hope he finds his way through Coors Field when he's only 5% owned on FanDuel. So yeah, load me up with some Yu Darvish shares as well. I'm going to be walking a very specific contrarian path on some of these plays, but if one of them connects, it's worth it with these ownerships for these pitcher talent levels. So Trevor Rogers, Luis Castillo, and Yu Darvish are all under-owned, in my opinion, for their talent, although they are in difficult, challenging spots.
Real quick on the follow-up, is it worth taking one small contrarian play and say, you know what, Colorado, with the help of the park, could get to Darvish, and now the Rockies might be an interesting stack?
Sure. And just going back to the Coors Field conversation, that's a spot where I will, if I end up with more Rockies than Padres tonight, I would not be shocked by that. I'll have some shares of both, but I would not, again, just based on where the ownership is and what the cost is, I would rather roster the Rockies side of this one at no ownership and very, very low cost than paying through the nose to be with 40% of the field on the Padres, even though they are by far the most likely team to succeed tonight.
Darvish, by the way, at Odd Shopper has an over-under 7.5 Ks. I thought that was a little low. I think it's low because of the park more so than anything else. So I'd have no problem going over on that one. Any concerns?
Yeah,
on
that's an interesting mark.
Yeah, that I would think it would be a little higher.
I've got him at 7. I have him at 7.77 in my model.
That's enough for me. Total. You're over. That's enough for me. All right, now we've got 4 games left, so feel free to say, nah, we don't need this Arizona-San Fran game or maybe the mini Seattle game at the end, but let's look Angels, Oakland, and try to take advantage. Frankie Montas, anybody on the mound here, Heaney as well.
I'm kind of bypassing both of these pitchers. Heaney projects well for me, so I'll probably end up with some shares of them. But 9,200 going up against this A's lineup, they hit lefties pretty well. There are some good righties in there, even with Matt Chapman struggling. Matt Olson hits lefties no problem, and they get some righty platoon specialist types. So I think it would be more about A's stacks for me, believe it or not. I might end up with a few shares just based on the projection and the fact that, again, it's a guy with under 5% ownership on the FanDuel slate, and I'm looking to spread out. I'm not going to get to Frankie Montas. Does not project that well for me. Just not 23.6% strikeout rate, 4.04 xFIP, a 1.36 WHIP. Just league average-ish and worse it with the guys on base. I think it's an okay spot for the Angels, but maybe not one I'm going to really smash either. If I'm going to Angels, it's the top end of the lineup, Upton, Ohtani, Rendon, and Walsh that I'm looking for. Try and grab some of those home runs.
Fair enough. And the A's we have as a little lower projection there. So definitely a lot of maneuverability, not really owned much at all. So that's a point to you where you might be able to find an area where people are not looking at it. Now we go back to Arizona, San Fran, Sammy Long, as far as the long relief is concerned, but we have 2 guys that are super low cost. No way you're getting to either, are you?
Yeah, no pitching in this game. Okay. Fire up the Giants bats against Alex Young, I think. That would basically be my approach.
They're super low owned too.
Yeah, there are some good spots like that on the board today. Taking a look at San Francisco, they are in the middle of the league with a 23.1% strikeout rate against lefties. They've struggled with the strikeouts against righties this season, but not lefties. Creating runs 6% better than average, and among the league leading teams with a 4.64% home run rate. Love the spot for San Francisco, particularly if nobody's on it.
Yeah, in Arizona, we just have such a low projected stack. Is there any bat that you could work with here? Or should we just stay away from the offense entirely?
From the Arizona bats,
yeah.
Going with Zach Littell in there, I get decent home run marks basically up and down the lineup. But it's a little sample based and some clunkiness in how the model works. That would go this. If I replaced it, I tried to swap the pitchers to Sammy what's his face in the middle, but he wasn't in my handedness profile either. So it became a lost cause there. That kid is a decent strikeout profile through the minors, but he never pitched above low A before this year. Then he dropped into double A to start the season, triple A for a couple of quick appearances. And then he's been up. He had one appearance, 4 innings and 7 strikeouts. It's a challenging request to put a kid like that in against any team. I don't care if it's the Diamondbacks or anybody else. For the money, I don't know that that's your value play on DK, whoever asked that at the top of the show.
Here's what I know. I don't know who to play. I don't know who to start. You know that more than me, but I can tell you this. The Phillies ain't winning this game tonight. They are going to lose in L.A. They stink out west. Julio Urias is going to dominate. Zach Eflin's a great pitcher. He doesn't walk anybody, but I'm going to tell you, just use that in the backdrop. The Phillies are not winning tonight. 2 decent pitching matches, though, pitchers, I should say, to go to in this matchup, though.
Boy, sounds like somebody's trying to manufacture a reverse jinx there
to
me. I don't know.
Nope, I'm telling you, they're going to lose out west. They're great against the Yankees at home. They suck against everybody out west.
I agree with your stance on the fact that they are not in great position to win this game. Let's go that way. 26.9% strikeout rate against lefties puts them 6th worst in baseball. They do create runs 5% better than the average, but only a 3.39% home run rate, a 159 ISO. So the power hasn't really been there for them so far this season. Those are a little bit average. Urias pitching fairly well, 27.6% strikeout rate on the season, 3.34 xFIP, a 0.97 whip, 13.2% induced swinging strikes, 32.8% CSW. Very nice. So I like the upside for Urias here. A pitcher I don't typically get to, but he's projecting fairly well for me. Eflin, I'd be a little bit more concerned about not getting a great projection on him, going up against a Dodgers team that is pretty good against right-handed pitching, 13% better than average creating runs, 22.2% strikeout rate among league leaders, 3.66% home run rate. So the pop's there a little bit. That's around average, but a 165 team ISO. So around average in the power department, but very good creating runs. And they've added Cody Bellinger back in the lineup, one of the best left-handed hitters in baseball. I'd be more concerned about Zach Eflin here.
I love it, man. I'd stack the Dodgers too. Just a personal little insert in there, especially everybody pretty cheap. Even bets at 4K. All right, we've run out of time, but we have time to sneak this in here. Minnesota, Seattle, and your home run pick. I already gave you all Tuve. If the bet's going down, then damn it, I'm going to ride with the ship. Just give us your big picture on Minnesota and Seattle and your home run pick on your way out, Terry.
I would say feel free to do whatever you want with either side in bats. Neither one projects like through the roof for me in terms of the power model or the projections. I would be more inclined to roster Twins going up against Chris Flexen than Mariners going up against a tomato can like J.A. Happ. I don't think either one of these pitchers is remotely on the board for any purpose whatsoever, regardless of price or popularity. So it would be all about the bats on both sides. If you want to go to the Mariners, I would probably stick toward the top of the lineup, maybe 1 through 6 ending at Dylan Moore. Well, actually, no, I couldn't say that because Tommy Murphy's got some sneaky power upside down there as well as a catcher. So you can go to either one of these stacks. My home run pick for the day, not to draw it out, was from the Boston Red Sox, JD Martinez.
Look at that. Beautiful. Look, we were only a minute late, and we got all 15 games in here. Tyler's head exploded a couple of times, but we got it right. Good stuff. Thank you to everybody. Don't worry. You don't have to go anywhere. Live Before Lock is going to clean up our mess and get you ready for even more activity for this slate. Thank you to Tyler. Thank you to Terry. Thank you to you. Have a great night. Like, subscribe, share, do it all.
What's up, guys? It is time here for a little MLB Live Before Lock show. We'll take you through the finer points today's 15-game MLB slate. We'll talk top pitchers. We'll talk top stacks. We'll talk about it all. But I am Chris Spags, joined once again by a man who needs your support and love now more than ever, having a tough time in the real world, but he is here in the name of Major League Baseball. He's nerd-ass Greg Ehrenberg. How are you doing, Greg?
Pretty poorly. So I was telling Spags right before we started. So I bought a house in October. And all ready to get, and also getting the whole thing renovated before I moved in. So it took months to do this, put a lot of money into it. And we were going to move in next week, my brother and I. We were all set. Everything was ready to go. And then my brother was over there this afternoon, and apparently the air conditioning busted and water leaked everywhere, damaged some walls, damaged the new hardwood floors that just got put in, a bunch of stuff that just got painted. That was ruined. So now it's a whole project. Did like $50,000 worth of damage. I'm not thrilled, but hey, maybe I'll make some of the money back in MLB DFS tonight.
Well, you know what, Greg? Sounds like you have no house advantage. Talk about our sponsor. There is also no house advantage, who's taking a different spin on daily fantasy sports by leaking water into new real estate and also giving you props across the NBA, MLB, NFL, and PGA for cash prizes. Is it exclusively a peer-to-peer fantasy sports platform that levels the playing field and makes it easier for you to win real cash compared to traditional DFS sites out there? They have over 500 player props offerings, and No House Advantage is actually the largest provider of player props in the entire industry. The best part of that is you get yourself a $20 first match deposit bonus with the promo code Awesemo. So go over to No House Advantage, download them in the App Store, and make sure to go and use that promo code Awesemo to get your $20 deposit match. And actually, I haven't taken a look through No House Advantage today for the MLB, but apparently that is part of what we're supposed to do on here. And I'm curious your thoughts, Greg, because I haven't played No House Advantage for MLB. I feel like for NBA, we've had some success with that, but do you have any thoughts on just how you'd approach it over there, where it is clearly a much tougher proposition, no pun intended, than some of the other DFS sites for MLB?
Yeah, to be honest, so I don't have access to No House Advantage in New Jersey. I don't have access to a house at all in New Jersey now, apparently. So there's all kinds of issues when it comes to houses. So I'm not totally sure what some of the best overall strategies are. I would still assume, though, that you want to prioritize stacking. So I would still think that, if there's an offense you think is in a really good spot, maybe you want to pair up, like Manny Machado with Fernando Tatis, take some of their overs, because there's still a correlation there to where, if we are going to expect the Padres, say, for instance, to score a bunch of runs today, which based on the ownership, we all are, then it would still make sense, I think, to pair some of those guys together. And then you hope they go off certainly in a bigger way than they did yesterday.
And I would say, too, some of the pitching props stand out, where Taijuan Walker, I know, is 5.5 strikeouts in the marketplaces around. If you check Odd Shopper, that's where his lines were earlier today. I think up to 6.5 at some books as well. Here on No House Advantage, he's 4.5 strikeouts are the prop for him today. So I would take the over on that one, just because the books are going to have him closer to 5.5. And that's maybe not a 10-pointer, but one that I think should be informative of the process on there. So play around with it. No House Advantage certainly is going to do their best to get you guys in there. So use that promo code Awesemo. Get your $20 deposit match as well. But Greg, this is a pretty ugly slate. So you are getting maybe a tough one to wade through for the pitching on really in every possible situation. It is a day where on DraftKings, we're looking at a chalk Mike Minor. I guess Andrew Heaney not that far behind, and Patrick Corbin picking up a shocking amount of ownership. But how are you handling pitching on the slate? Because I know you've historically been a Yu Darvish guy. Today he's cheaper and going to be less owned because of the game at Coors. But is there anybody, I guess, you're really gravitating towards that maybe the field isn't?
So you mentioned one of the guys right there, Yu Darvish. My two most rostered pitchers right now are Yu Darvish and Trevor Rogers. So now what ends up happening is earlier in the day, I was looking at some of these stacks and thinking like, okay, I guess I'll end up on the Padres because they make sense. They don't seem to be negatively leveraged, even though they're picking a bunch of ownership. But then as I'm starting to get later in the day and I started to build my lineups, I uploaded them, just before we started. And I kind of ended up prioritizing some of the cheaper offenses, getting away from the Padres a little bit. And, fingers crossed that they do something similar to what they did yesterday, or at least don't score a million runs. And I think relative to ownership, I think that Trevor Rogers and Yu Darvish are the two best pitching plays on DraftKings. We have Yu Darvish only projected for 13% ownership. Trevor Rogers, who's arguably been a better pitcher than anybody on the slate other than Yu Darvish, only projected for 4% ownership today. That's a really low number. And to me, those are the two best pitching options. And it gives me a lot of a different construction than most of the field, because, it looks like a lot of the field is going to some of these risky, cheaper pitchers to just jam in the Padres.
Yeah, I think it's a reasonable way to look at it. And to me, Yu Darvish, I certainly wouldn't mind taking that stab at. We talked about a lot about Coors earlier on the tip-off, talked about it yesterday as well with Austin Gomber having the outlier day that I was feeling bullish on. I do think Yu comes with a little bit, I mean, this is going to sound like a stupid sentence out of context, but Yu Darvish comes a little bit more risk than Austin Gomber. But the thing with Yu is that he does give up a really high launch angle. That ball does fly. He's always struggled a little bit with home run power. But I think to me, as my dog is getting excited because my girlfriend's apparently returning from the gym, I would say in this spot, to me, Yu Darvish just being able to get strikeouts is the main thing. And his price tag being down for that as well, I think just screams to me that Yu at 10% ownership is a crazy one where even if you get to 25, that's double the field and that's not going to kill you at all. Like, I think that's a really strong play today.
Yeah. And by the way, actually, so I just updated the ownership because we just got a fresh one that came in. Yu Darvish now projected for 8% ownership and Trevor Rogers projected for 3%. Like, those are numbers that I just think are crazy low because the pitching options really suck today. And sure, like, I guess a really favorable matchup for Mike Minor going up against Detroit, right? And he's in my player pool. I'm about even with the field on him. But on most slates, do we really think that the likely outcome for Mike Minor is that much greater than Trevor Rogers or Yu Darvish? I mean, we have Yu Darvish with a third of the ownership of Mike Minor. We have Trevor Rogers with an eighth of the ownership of Mike Minor. And he just doesn't outscore. He doesn't outscore Trevor Rogers 8x the time. And we can't even make a pricing argument here in terms of trying to get cheap with Mike Minor to pay up for the bats because Mike Minor's 9,200, Yu Darvish is 9,400, Trevor Rogers is 10,000. So while he is a little bit cheaper, it's not enough that it should dictate this much ownership.
Yeah, I would agree. And I'm with you. I think Mike Minor's still, like, despite being chalk, I think being with the field on him seems like the right move because it is a really weak slate. Like, normally for a 15 gamer, we're usually going to have at least one ace in the mix. And I think there really isn't one unless, I guess there's aces relative to the teams. We're like, Trevor Rogers is probably the ace for Miami, but still not an ace relative to the tier of what we normally expect with guys like DeGrom or Bauer or anybody like that. But I'm with you. Like, I think it's guys who are really not in necessarily advantageous spots besides Minor. Where Trevor Rogers, you are going against the Cardinals team as a 22% K rate, but I think at a certain point, especially on a slate like this one, you kind of have to trust the talent in some of the spots. And the Rogers 3% ownership, to me, I get he's 10K, but and that's definitely a little bit of a sticker shock because he's been around the 8K range. I think topped that at 9K, but it's still a price tag we're paying up to get a guy who's probably got, if not the most live arm, the top 3 most live arms on the slate.
Yeah, and the other thing too, sometimes with paying up for pitching. So yesterday, for instance, the pitching options all kind of sucked. And Tyler Glasnow was a chalk pitcher. I was on him very heavily. He was my most rostered player. He ends up getting hurt after 4 innings. So he scores, I think it was 14.6 DraftKings points. I think that was the exact amount off the top of my head. He ends up being in the first place lineup anyway, even though he only pitched 4 innings. And just because all the other pitching options suck, I don't know that this slate is going to be that much different than yesterday. Yesterday was a 13-game slate. Today's a 15-game slate. It's really hard to look at these pitching options and feel really comfortable in any of them. And so that's also why I'm looking at some of the ownerships here. And number one, these were players that stood out to me even before, if you were just to compare them on our top pitchers. Well, even without that, I think like we saw Curse of the Blitz in chat. She's like, really 3% for Trevor Rogers. Like, you don't need to be even looking at the top stacks just to know that some of these players have better odds of landing the optimal lineup than the projected ownership.
And I would say for Rogers too, like, it's not really that big of a park downgrade either. St. Louis, not that humid today, 37% humidity, 84 degrees out there, and it's only a 4 implied run total against him. And, the park too, not playing crazy well for power unless it is a humid day. That's not the case today. So I'm with you. I think Rogers paying that 10K price tag, definitely willing to go there. I guess let's talk about some of the chalk pitchers because we talked a little bit about Mike Minor, but let's dig in a little more because he's going against Detroit. People maybe will remember yesterday where Detroit was a team that I think, Greg, you mentioned on the strategy show. Somebody had mentioned actually that I talked about Gomber a good amount. You talked about Detroit a good amount. Collectively, we might have given somebody a winning lineup out there. But it is a spot here going against Detroit where, normally it's going to go a little bit more easily, you would think, for the pitcher. But Mike Minor on the year does have himself a 27% K rate, a little bit lower than that. I'm rounding up, but still strong numbers. He does, I think, struggle with power on the year, a 10% barrel ball rate, 17-degree launch angle, also not great to see. But it's a Detroit team that's striking out at a 30% clip on the year against left-hand pitching, a 123 ISO. I don't know how you wouldn't like a good amount of Mike Minor, even if the ownership, like we talked about, 25% to me seems like a really efficient number.
Yeah, I am right around even with the field on Mike Minor. So relative to ownership, I'm much higher on Trevor Rogers and Yu Darvish, and actually do have slightly more exposure to them than Mike Minor. But still, I mean, it's hard for me to get away from Mike Minor entirely just because of the ease of the matchup. Whereas Yu Darvish pitching in Colorado, we have Trevor Rogers pitching in St. Louis. So I don't want to be all in on those guys or anything, but I've just aligned myself on the field with Mike Minor. I think the price tag is a little high, but the matchup is good enough to where I don't want it to be like I have zero Mike Minor and it ruins my night or anything.
And the other big chalk pitcher of the day, or one of the other big chalk pitchers of the day, is going to be Andrew Heaney, who has a cheaper price tag, which I think has been the case for him a lot. And people get roped into playing Andrew Heaney a good amount here because he's one of those guys that does get fantasy results with strikeouts, 29% K rate. He's also going to get a park upgrade for himself because he's playing in Oakland. It's going to be a not hot day today there, 68 degrees, 50% humidity. And Heaney does struggle with power, but I think that power is going to play better here. So Heaney, to me, I think there are like a lot of guys that I feel like on the slate, I would be very comfortable getting 25%, which is different than yesterday where I mentioned just, hey, spread the ownership around a bunch of guys to under 10% or so. But Heaney today, I feel like another quarter ownership guy. It's a little bit less than the field on DraftKings, where it's projected for 27%. But going against Oakland comes with some risk, Greg. But I feel like Heaney's strikeout ability, like I could play the volatility on both sides and get Oakland bats as well at very low ownership.
So there is one funny thing about Andrew Heaney. He's almost only pitched on Tuesdays today. The reason I know that to be the case is because I do the Tuesday strategy show with Pete McCarthy, and we have Andrew Heaney to talk about every day, and we just hit the same talking points every time because he's always a very highly volatile pitcher who, when he pitches well, the strikeout rate for him has been so high this year that he produces good fantasy results. But at the same time, he has not really been a good real life pitcher. So he just kind of alternates getting destroyed and having really big fantasy games. So here's his last handful of outings. 31 fantasy points, 5, 32, 6, -4, 16, 26, and 26. So to me, I want to be on both sides of Heaney. I'm overweight to the field on A's stacks, and I'm also overweight to the field on Heaney just because I think there is so much strikeout upside from him relative to his price point. So something's going to win out here. Either Oakland's probably going to score like 7 or 8 runs, or Heaney's going to score 20 plus fantasy points. So it's something that has a very high probability of being a good GPP spot. So I like playing both sides there.
Yeah. And I think GPP spot's something I've been talking to a lot, just generally about the idea of mutual volatility, where you could definitely see a pathway for Heaney to have, good strikeout numbers here. He's pitching 93 pitches per appearance as well. So that's a pretty good runway. Isn't the most efficient in terms of finishing guys off of 4.3. I might need to consider how I'm phrasing that one. Finishing guys off sounds not ideal for anybody. 4.3 pitches per plate appearance though. So that's something for Heaney that you would like to see a little better, because when he's not getting strikeouts right away, that's where the pitch count starts to get drawn out, and you could see a guy not have the day you'd like to see. And I think that sort of is borne out by what Greg is talking about, the recent results with Heaney. But to me, play some Oakland bats to hedge against Heaney, but play him as well. And I think this guy, the other chalk play of the day on DraftKings, which I think we're going to hit on here, is going to be Patrick Corbin. And this one for me, Greg, I don't love the spot. I don't love Corbin on the year. I have advocated for him a little bit here and there because I think he's better than what he's shown on the year. A 280 batting average. He's historically been since 2019, a 250 batting average guy, 4.6% on run rate this year, normally a 3.3% on run rate guy. So we're talking basically double there, or not actually, well, whatever. And we're also got a good amount of strikeout drop off as well. 24.7% K rate and 18% K rate this year. He should be better, but going against Pittsburgh, like they're not a good team, but they also don't strike out. So I don't know if this is a spot where you want to have Corbin, where all it takes is him getting BABIP to death, which has happened a lot, the 300 BABIP on the year. And that's always been something he struggled with. Like, I think Corbin's the weakest play out of all the chalk ones, even accounting for price. And I know people were asking a lot about Sammy Long in the last show. I'd take stabs on a lot of guys, including Sammy Long, before I would go this heavy on Patrick Corbin.
Yeah. So I ended up with a little bit of exposure to Pirate stacks just because of the ownership on Corbin. So the latest ownership update we have, Patrick Corbin is now projected to be the most rostered pitcher on DraftKings. He is projected for 28% ownership. And that is such a high number for a guy who's flat out sucked this year. He's had a couple of okay starts, but for the most part, Patrick Corbin, 6.21 ERA, 6.54 expected ERA. The underlying numbers are no good. He's a career low strikeout rate, a career high walk rate. There's nothing here that really looks redeeming to me. And sure, it's a favorable matchup against the Pirates. He's cheap. It is a slate where there aren't good pitching options. And if he was, 5% owned, I'd be willing to take stabs at him. But when he's coming in nearly a third of the field's lineups, he's somebody who I'm just apt to take a few shots on the Pirates, pay up for some pitching. And let's see, what do I currently have the Pirates? I have them 5% of my lineups right now are Pirate stacks. And it is solely because of the ownership right now on Patrick Corbin.
And Corbin will be highly owned on both sides on DraftKings. He's going to be around that 25 to 33% mark based on the ownership runs that we're getting here. And we will do money time coming up in 10 minutes as well. So I think Sophis mentioned he hasn't been a part of one in a while. So prepare yourself for the magic that is me reading out top 5 plays on top 5 owned plays on DraftKings and FanDuel. But Corbin going to be chalky on FanDuel as well. And Greg, I don't know if you have any thoughts on the slate over there where Luis Castillo is somebody we haven't talked about yet. And I think he's a play that is also going to be decently owned, but I'd rather go that direction at a very comparable price tag. But how are you feeling about Corbin, where he's a number 2 owned guy on FanDuel?
Yeah, so FanDuel relative to price. So we have Patrick Corbin at 7,000, and then you mentioned Luis Castillo there at 7,300. My lean would be to go towards Eduardo Rodriguez if you're going to a really cheap pitcher. And earlier in the day, when we were looking at the slate, I didn't really like Eduardo Rodriguez because he was projecting for a bunch of ownership, and the matchup is difficult against Atlanta. That is no longer the case. Eduardo Rodriguez is now projecting for 8.9% ownership on FanDuel. And on DraftKings, he's projecting for 13% ownership. We had him closer to 20 on DraftKings earlier in the day. And on FanDuel, he was projecting for like 15 or something like that. So 6,400 on FanDuel, that's a really cheap price for Eduardo Rodriguez. And if you look at his numbers this year, he's struggled with run prevention. He's a 6.03 ERA. But if you look at his underlying numbers, they're pretty solid. He has a 3.5 non-expected ERA, 3.85 FIP. So the strikeout rate, 25.8%. That's above his career average, 6.3% walk rate, actually the lowest of his career. So everything has looked pretty good for Eduardo Rodriguez coming back from his bout with COVID last year. It looks like he's back on track if you look at the underlying numbers, even if the ERA doesn't bear that out, because he has a 3.85 FIP. He has a 3.93 FIP for his career. So everything looks the same. He's just gotten really unlucky. Most of it is because he's a 370 batting average on balls in play. So I like some positive regression for Eduardo Rodriguez, and that's a really cheap price from at 6,400 on FanDuel.
Yeah, I was going to say the BABIP definitely jumps out here. The 370 mark, the 292 batting average overall. Like those are things that can sort of normalize here. I don't know. It's weird because Atlanta, I know, started the year really poor against left-hand pitching, but now they have a 200 ISO on the year against lefties. So that gives me a little bit of fear. Like I think you're taking on a bit of risk, but relative to days in Atlanta, like it's not that humid there today. It is decently hot at 85 degrees, but not getting the humidity. I agree like that it's worth taking the shots. And as on DraftKings too at 13%, I'm on the same boat too. Yeah, I think it's a play that honestly, like it doesn't seem like a sexy play, but he is getting a 26% K rate on the year and has been unlucky. So this is certainly a spot where wouldn't shock you to see a home run or two given up, but I think as well, wouldn't shock you if he just kind of survives and then, maybe has a good enough day to get through, especially at that cheap price tag on FanDuel.
Yeah. And then also, I mean, relative to, some of the other pitching options we have on the slate today, Eduardo Rodriguez, he is projecting to be, slightly under-owned. We do have him with a 13.2% ownership share, but 13.5% chance to be a top 2 pitcher, and then a 15% chance to be a top 2 value. So, that's something that could be really valuable on a slate like this, particularly if you're looking to spend up for some of the bats at Coors Field. So I think Eduardo Rodriguez is a sensible SP2 on DraftKings. And then FanDuel, if you want to save money, I think he makes more sense than some of the more popular options like Corbin and Luis Castillo.
We just got a super chat from Artful Dodger saying, I signed up for Awesemo monthly subscription last month and I'm killing MLB ever since. Just wanted to say I appreciate the content. You guys have helped me more than you know. That is very kind to hear and also very eloquently stated by YouTube super chat dynamic. So we appreciate that very much. Obviously, we appreciate all the super chats, but I just wanted to read that here because A, we read all the super chats, but B, just a really nice thing to hear. And if you want to be a part of the Awesemo community as well, feel free to check out a monthly subscription and use the promo code MLB live before lock. If you do that, you can get 15% off your first week of Awesemo Plus if you're a new sign up. So give it a shot here. Honestly, I feel like last night between the NBA and MLB, I got tagged in more winning screenshots than I have in a while. And it also probably was reflective of the fact that the NBA slate, I feel like a million people chopped that one up on every tournament. But great to see though people doing well. And honestly, very nice to hear kind words. I think especially we get so many mean people. It's like, what? Who is this guy saying something nice? But what an artful Dodger he is.
Yeah, we have had a good amount of positive comments lately. And I think a lot of that has been because there have been a lot of people taking first on these showdown slates more than usual. I know, we've had some days where it's like, hey, who won first? Everybody wins a GPP some of these days.
It's like Oprah giving away GPPs lately on some of these slates. But here's a guy, Greg, I'm actually curious your thoughts on. And to be clear, on FanDuel, if you are, I know we talked a little bit about that, but this guy not going to be in play on FanDuel because you're not going to get the quality outing bonus and all that. But Sam Long is somebody I know with the deeper dive guys. The audience is asking a lot of both Aton and Terry before us. And I think Terry had done what I did initially, had Zach Littell and didn't even think about Sam Long or Sammy Long. I think he's Sam Long on most of the sheets, but everybody calls him Sammy. And he is a guy who had one monster outing so far this year. where he had a 50% K rate, a 1.7 xFIP, basically, video game numbers. If Tyler were good at MLB The Show, that's what Sam Long would be. Did that just for that reaction that Tyler gave right now, looking around like Scooby-Doo, confused to what's happening. But Sam Long, Greg, a monster strikeout guy in a limited sample size. To me, though, over the longer term, and it's funny because on my sheet, he's right under this guy. He looks like Andrew Heaney to me, based on the numbers so far. 13% swinging strike rate, 36% chase rate. Heaney at 13.2% swinging strike rate, 37.5% chase rate. So I don't expect Sam Long to maintain a 50% K rate. I'll go on that limb. But I think still, if he's around a 28% K rate guy like Heaney is, maybe a little bit less than that, I think he's viable on the slate on DraftKings. So I don't mind taking the stab, but how do you feel about him going against an Arizona team who admittedly doesn't strike out a lot against lefties?
Yeah, and we do have a super chat here from Soldope who was asking about Sammy Long, which, by the way, his close friends such as myself, we call him Samuel Long, but whatever. Some people call him Sam, some people call him Sammy, I call him Samuel. But here's one of the issues I have with some of these long relievers. Number one, even though he was really good in his last outing against the Rangers, he only pitched 4 innings. And realistically, what is the upside of somebody when they pitch 4 innings? And also, he's 6,200, so it's not like we're getting him for 4,000 or anything like that. But what is the legitimate upside in somebody who's probably only going to pitch 4 innings at 6,200? He still scored under 20 fantasy points in his last start, and he was basically perfect. Pitched 4 innings, struck out 7 guys, walked 1. So he was unbelievable. And it's not like he scored a ridiculous amount of fantasy points. And the other thing, too, we have to consider, sometimes the guys who are pegged as long relievers don't even end up entering the game. I know there was a slate we had. It was a showdown slate. It was the Marlins and the Red Sox. And this was sometime last week. And it was Nick Castellanos, I think, long reliever for the Marlins. He was expected to be the long reliever, never ended up entering the game. So Sammy Long, we also have to factor in that there's probably a 10 to 15% chance that they opt to not pitch him today. And to me, I think there are a lot of other cheap guys that have gone over today that I prefer to him, that I feel better about, that I think have more upside. So I don't have him in my player pool right now. I understand why other people would be on him, but to me, somebody who I think is probably going to only pitch 4 or so innings if he enters the game, it's not something that interests me.
So I guess to me, because you look at the price tag, and I think this may be the difference that you're seeing some other guys is cheap, but to me, I just look at it in the more binary fashion of like, okay, 6,200. So if you were to go above him by 500, you're talking J.A. Happ. If you're to go the same price tag, you're talking Chris Flexen. Cal Quantrill is also a little bit more expensive. Matt Harvey's cheaper. Alec Mills a little more expensive. Brett Anderson, who historically, he's now no longer a 0 chance of being a top pitcher and 0 chance of being a top value. So that has improved for him over the last hour or so. So good for him. Chichi Gonzalez also cheaper. I don't think any of those guys are good. And I think the issue for me is that Sammy Long, I think, is good. And one thing too that might make him not Heaney is that he was giving up a really low launch angle, a -6 degree launch angle. Granted, guys are going to adjust a little bit to that. He's not going to always have guys chopping down forever, especially with that kind of strikeout rate. But I think he's worth the flyer today. And I admit, like, it is a tough spot. The Diamondbacks don't strike out a lot. The lineup they're going to have today also still only a 20% K rate against left-hand pitching since 2019 in aggregate. But I think in the spot, I'd be willing to take the flyer because he had 70 pitches last game. If he gets up to 80, and I think the one difference too is that I expect him to pitch, because there was a whole article, I think it might have been The Athletic, but it was definitely one of those baseball insider ones for the Giants, talking about how like this is the whole strategy that I expect more teams to do, is like rookie guys coming in as long relievers, and that's how you indoctrinate him, because then you basically can take him out. So he's not going to face the top of the order and face the tough guys. He'll sort of build confidence going against the crappier parts of the order. And if you take out the top 3 for Arizona, like if Littell just gets bombed by those guys and doesn't leave Long a really terrible situation, like he's going to go against Carson Kelly, who's not great against lefties, and he's going to avoid Ketel Marte, or excuse me, he's going to go to Walker. He's not going to face Kelly. He's not going to face Marte. Like, it's not a bad spot for Long to get going. So I would just take the stab. I get your logic, but I just got to present the counterpoint, because I think it's worth it on the slate where it's so ugly everywhere.
So if I'm going really cheap at pitching, I'd rather go to Alex Young. I didn't even know that pitchers were allowed to be this cheap. I thought the min salary for pitchers, wasn't it 6,000 or 5,000? I mean, like, all of a sudden, how is there a pitcher who's 3,900 on DraftKings? I can't ever remember seeing that before.
I think 4,000 is definitely the lowest I can recall seeing, because that's some of the like the legit opener guys I know have been billed at that. But Alex Young defying this pay scale, I guess. Yeah,
3,900. So once again, not a good option, but at least we know one thing for sure. He is starting, so he's gonna get on the mound for the Diamondbacks. The matchup is not great against the Giants, but he's a starting pitcher, 3,900, right? Like, what happens if he goes out and scores 14 fantasy points? He's the best value on the slate in terms of pitchers by a pretty good margin. It's such a cheap price tag that, I mean, I have him projected for 8 fantasy points, and he still winds up in some of my lineups.
Yeah, I get it. And look, I've talked a lot about just being willing to play cheap guys sometimes because it's going to make your lineup construction look better. And like you're saying, if he does somehow luck into 13 fantasy points, 14 fantasy points, whatever it may be, he's going to look like a lot better play. So I have no issue taking a little bit of Alex Young too. I just think to me that I think Sam Long is like legitimately a viable play and one that I'm curious to see what he does. And I'm curious to see how he continues to perform because the numbers certainly are noteworthy. Just, probably not pretending a guy is going to be a 50% strikeout rate guy forever. We just got a couple more lineups in, but Greg, anybody else a pitcher you want to hit on? We're obviously going to talk more about top stacks here coming up in the back half of the show after we do some money time, but is there anybody else a pitcher that you really want to bring to the people here? Because I feel like we've covered most of the key guys.
So somebody who I am overweight feel on, Casey Mize. I think there's been a couple of slates where you and I have talked about him recently, but just the overall idea of betting on the arm talent there. A guy who's number 1 overall pick in the draft just 3 years ago, got off to a really slow start in his major league career, but has really started to put it together as of late. So Casey Mize, his last handful of starts, 15 DraftKings points, 19, 20, 21, 30, 18. So the numbers overall for the season are not great for Mize, except also he's a young pitcher who seems to be improving as he goes along with a really favorable outlook as a prospect. And he's projected for 0.5% ownership today at 7,100. So the matchup going up against Kansas City, not particularly great, but he is somebody who with a 0.5% projected ownership, we have for a 10.1% chance to be one of the top 2 value pitchers on the slate, and then a 6% chance to be one of the top 2 overall scoring pitchers on the slate. So with that in mind, Casey Mize, 0.5% projected ownership. He is in right around 10% of my lineups right now.
Yeah, I don't mind Mize. I don't know if it's a great strikeout matchup going against Kansas City, but I agree, like the arm talent being there, certainly something you don't mind taking a stab on. And similarly, I guess this isn't really an arm talent thing, but I don't know if this is one of your Korean baseball guys, but I assume he may have been. Kwang Hyun Kim, I think, is kind of interesting going against Miami. He's not been good on the year, but Miami's also very not good against left-hand pitching. This particular lineup today it's going to be propped up by guys like Trevor Rogers and Jesus Sanchez not having great results so far, but a 32.5% aggregate K rate in the lineup on the year, 28% K rate against left-hand pitching. If Kwang Hyun Kim's ever going to have like a monster day, this is probably the day where I think it would happen, though. Pitch count's not fantastic, but I think as a price point pivot to a guy like Corbin, I would gladly shave off a little bit of Corbin ownership to go to Kwang Hyun Kim.
Yeah, I have rostered him a couple of times this year with very limited success. So here's one of the issues with Kwang Hyun Kim is even overseas, he did not generate swing and misses. So the strikeout rate. Oh, okay, cool. Fangraphs does have the strikeout rate. I thought they might have just had Ks per 9 for the KBO stats, but they have the strikeout rates if you scroll down. So his final few years in the KBO, he had a career high 23.5% K rate. Other years in the KBO, 19.9% K rate, 21.2, 19.4, 17.6. So this is a guy who wasn't even generating swing and misses in the KBO. Now he comes over to the big leagues, and he is generating a little bit more swing and misses, but still average fastball velocity below 90 miles per hour. He's a 4.05 ERA, 4.64 expected ERA. To me, this is just a very middle of the road pitcher without a lot of fantasy appeal because of the lack of stuff and the lack of ability to generate swing and misses. So to me, he is a KBO guy, not one of my KBO guys, but he is one in general, but not somebody I like today.
I'm glad you're just not indiscriminately letting them all in the KBO Kids Club. You gotta earn your way in.
There is a reason for it though. And
yes.
It is that he was not in the KBO last year, or else he would be probably one of my KBO guys.
There you go. Okay, fair enough. So he's been there before, though. That's the important thing, is that he's done it before. Luis Castillo, the last guy I feel like we just need to touch on a little bit here because talked about on the tip-off, I do think the strikeout prop for him is appealing. I do think the spot against Milwaukee on the year, 28.5% K rate against left-hand pitching, also definitely appealing. The lineup certainly a little stronger than it has been for portions of that. But you are still going to have guys like Dan Vogelbach in the order, who's been really bad historically against fellow lefties. And this spot, to me, Castillo, I think somebody we've talked about recently, I feel like on one of the slates, Greg, but in this spot, I expect his strikeouts to continue to positively regress. And I think it's games like this one that do lead them to continue to positively regress to closer to the 27.4% mark that he's had since 2019. This year at 20.4%. I don't know if you have the same faith in him that I do, but I just feel like Castillo's just one of those guys that I'm willing to buy in a little bit here on a slate where it's pretty ugly and he seems maybe a little bit overowned. But I think if you're getting to 15% of the field, 20%, I just wouldn't mind having that much of a share.
Well, his last 2 starts, he did have 18 and 23 fantasy points, which is the first time he's had back-to-back games with double-digit fantasy points, the second and third starts of the season. So take of that what you will. Either is he due for a bad game or is he figuring it out? It's probably none of the above. I think he's just not a very good pitcher right now, and I don't know what happened to him because there was a point in time in the offseason where the Yankees and the Reds, there was reports they were negotiating a trade, and the Reds were asking for like 3 top prospects, Gleyber Torres, and like the Yankees were considering it, but then ultimately didn't want to give up Gleyber Torres. And now Luis Castillo, his trade value would have to be almost nothing, because now we got a guy who's 28 years old. His velocity is slightly down from last year. He has a 6.47 ERA. Has been a little bit unlucky, looks like, to have those numbers, because he does have a 4.02 expected ERA, 4.56 FIP. But still, I think there's reason to think that his actual ERA would be much worse than his underlying stats, because he's giving up so much hard contact this year. So the 335 BABIP, I don't think that's that crazy. Is a 17.3% home run to fly ball rate. For his career, he has a 17.2% home run to fly ball rate. So that's not really something that's, out of the norm for him. So I just think he's a guy who just goes over-owned because of his name value every single slate at this point. And it's crazy, because he was legitimately one of the best pitchers in baseball last year, and he's completely fallen apart.
I think, like looking at the BABIP, I think you see it be at 340 this year compared to 290 since 2019. Like, that's a pretty big jump up. He's also walking guys more. And I think the issue really is that he's not getting guys to bite out of the zone or just to get swinging strikes. Like, he's walking guys at a 9.2% clip, but the swinging strike rate's down from 14.9% to 11.4. So I'm hoping he's figured something out. I think the 2 games in a row could sort of be that normalizing, where just getting guys to chase a little more and to buy into his stuff rather than be able to see it straight. And just on the year too, like still a 7-degree launch angle. So he's keeping the ball down, 5.4% barrel ball rate. So I think it comes with not a lot of risk, and I think it's worth the risk. Really is the ownership, I think, is the main thing for me. But I think I'm more of a believer than you, and I think he's a guy that I think can get back in the mix. But I agree, his days of probably being like treated like he was a superstar pitcher, I think those are probably gone. We just need to be league average. I think he's usable for fantasy. Let's flip the hat and do money time here. Let's give the top 5 owned plays on DraftKings and Fanduel, and it's going to segue well over to the hitting part of the show, because there are going to be quite a bit of hitters here in the top owned plays. Starting with Fernando Tatis, number 1 projected owned play, 43% on DraftKings. Number 2, Trent Grisham, 39% on DraftKings. Number 3, Manny Machado, 32% on DraftKings. Number 4, Aristides Aquino, 30%. Cheap price tag on him and a good matchup going to drive that up. And then Tommy Pham, another Padre here at 27% expected ownership. And let's just save the conversation. I'll do FanDuel real fast, and then we can talk about the Padres, because we have to do that for a little bit here. Fernando Tatis on FanDuel, number 1 at 43%. Number 2, Manny Machado, number 2 at 37%. Number 3, Trent Grisham, number 3 at 33%. Number 4, Tommy Pham, at 33% as well. And number 5, Jose Ramirez at 26%. So Jose Ramirez, boy, how are you going to play that guy? Greg, let's talk about the Padres. What are you doing with them? Because I think, again, Chichi Gonzalez is just one of those guys not viable to play today, like I thought Gomber was yesterday, but they all keep the ball down. And all the Rockies pitchers, I don't know what's changed, but they have done such a good job doing it. And Chichi may be the one you could poke holes in the most compared to like Senzatella and Gomber and John Gray as well. But I think Chichi can be mediocre and just give up a home run or 2. And I don't love the full 5-man stack. It's too owned for me to play, Greg, but how are you handling it?
Yeah, so I have exposure to them, but much less than the field. And by the way, we don't even have them as going egregiously over-owned in the top stacks to us. So even though they have a 25% ownership share, we have the Padres with a 23% chance of being the top stack on the slate. So this is different than yesterday, where yesterday we had them with, it was like a 23% ownership share, but a 15% chance to be a top stack. So they ended up yesterday being the most negatively leveraged team on the slate. And today they're a little bit over-owned, but nothing really egregious. So I'm way under the field on them still, just because I ended up prioritizing some of those expensive pitchers that I didn't think I was going to earlier in the day. And I just like the idea that I'm on a way different lineup construction than everybody else. So I have, let's see, what do I have for stacks of the Padres? It is 7%. So they're in my player pool, much less than the field. So if they do go off, I guess I have a slight chance of hitting the nuts, but ultimately, I'm going to hope that the Padres are not one of the higher scoring teams, even though I have them in 7% of my lineups, just because, the ownership here is so egregious on some of the individual hitters. So there are ways to differentiate a little bit if you're rostering guys towards the bottom of the order. But it's hard for me to get there given some of the pitchers that I like and think are underowned.
And I think this total too, I believe, is the highest we've seen so far this year, to just under 7 implied runs, 6.9 implied runs. So a nice total there. But I think, to me, just taking mini stacks, I think there's a decent chance you can capture the production that's necessary from the team in a mini stack, or even potentially a one-off, where like it wouldn't shock me if you get, a grand slam here from one of these guys, and then that's the day, and that's what ruins Chi-Chi's day. Like Chi-Chi sucks. Like, to be clear, don't play Chi-Chi today. I did my advocating for a Colorado pitcher yesterday. It worked out. Not going to happen very often. But this is the thing to me, is that like he can just do enough where if he lets Tommy Pham hit a single, if he lets Trent Grisham hit a single, if these guys are hitting, seeing eye liners through Coors, like that can be the way that he gives up Coors production without giving up bombs. And I think there's sometimes people just go like, oh, Coors, like home runs. And it's not always that way. And I think that's something that to me has been a profitable strategy. So take your 3-man stacks, take your 2-man stacks, take your one-offs, I think. But if you take a 5-man, I'll be deeply shocked if a 5-man breaks a slate. And I might be a bold take, Greg, but I just don't think the 5-man ends up being the winner. And I guess the overall question I'd have for you too, my suggested strategy on the tip-off was cap it at 15% for each guy. And I think that way you're still getting enough here. You maybe get a little bit more of guys like Cronenworth or Hosmer or Profar, Caratini. You could still capitalize on guys being on base. But I think that's the way I would handle it. But I guess, do you have any direct guidance on how you would do it, whether it be capping 5-man stacks, going to one-offs? Just what would you do to try to get the ownership to be different?
Yeah, I mean, I still have, like Trent Grisham a bunch as a one-off. I have Fernando Tatis a bunch as one-off. It's just nowhere near the field, because I mean, we have these guys projected for 40+% ownership, and those are numbers that are hard for me to get to. But I have a bunch of them around 20%, and to me, it's still less than the field. But I still think I'm capturing some upside in these guys as one-offs. And also, like I said, I do have 7% 5-man stacks. There is one player in the lineup that I'm overweight to. Can you guess which guy it is?
I would think it's going to be Cronenworth.
Profar.
Profar. Interesting. Okay. Why Profar?
Well, him and Caratini are the two cheap guys in the lineup. Yeah. Okay. So it's number one, a price point thing, but then also he's picking up almost no ownership. So Profar, he's been in and out of the lineup. We haven't seen him play a lot recently, but just the fact that he's 8% owned at sub 4K, also at a position, that's we have more ability to fill, 3 outfield spots on DraftKings. So Profar to me, 3,900. That's the one that makes the most sense relative to ownership.
Okay. I think the price tag, I can certainly see that. And Caratini too, being a catcher, certainly not a guy who's been fantastic by any stretch in terms of power, but a league average home run rate guy playing in Coors. And again, to me, just as capable, like not as capable of being Fernando Tatis on a given day, but like if they throw around Tatis, or Tatis just, has great hits that aren't home runs, you could easily see a guy like Caratini benefit, or Profar or Cronenworth, I think, just by having those guys on base. So that to me is a strategy for the day. And I guess similarly, we met to talk about you in the first half, and a guy that I think we both believe in, but to me, he's a very volatile pitcher in this spot too, where he's letting a lot of fly balls go out. Again, has struggled with power more so over the course of a longer period of time, where this year, it's a 2.6% on run rate, but does have a 3.4% since 2019, and a 183 ISO to lefties in particular that I think could give him a little danger here. But are you getting any Rocky stacks? Because they are being treated like they're a team playing in any other park. And I know they suck and you is good, but I still think you could take some shots at Colorado here at really like no ownership.
Yeah, but according to the top stacks, they don't justify ownership. We have them with a 2.8% chance of being the top stack on the slate, and we have them with a 2.8% ownership share. So I'm fairly high on Darvish today. That's who I prefer. Darvish's numbers for the year have been really strong. He's a 2.28 ERA, 2.71 expected ERA. And like you said, also, I mean, the Rockies are towards the bottom of the league in WRC plus against right-handed pitching. Obviously, anything could happen at Coors Field, but I prefer to side with Darvish in a pretty significant way in this spot.
Yeah, I mean, Darvish, we talked about in the pitching half of the show, but certainly going to be a low-owned play, under 10% projected ownership on DraftKings. Similar numbers on Fanduel. So if you are like Greg and me and willing to take some stabs on this guy, I think, being unafraid to play pitchers at Coors is certainly a risky strategy, but one that has paid off more than enough times, even excluding recency bias that we could talk about with that stuff. What stack are you prioritizing besides that? Because after you get to that San Diego stack, it falls off a cliff where you have Boston projected now for over a 5% chance to be a top stack, and also be a little bit underowned. So they're certainly going to be a team that should profile as a priority if you are following the top stacks tool. But are they a team you're going to a lot, or is there one stack you find to be a cut above the rest where the data seems to indicate it's pretty flat for all these teams?
Yeah, so there is a particular pitcher that I have disagreed with our data on quite frequently this year, and that is Matt Harvey. We have basically anytime a team goes up against Matt Harvey, we generally tend to rate out that offense as over-owned. I think Matt Harvey sucks. I think that rostering pitchers against hitters against him is about as safe as it gets. Matt Harvey does not belong pitching at the major league level anymore. And, as hard as as hard as it generally is to find safety out of offenses, I actually think there's more safety stacking against Matt Harvey than there is stacking the Padres today. Because here are Matt Harvey's last handful of outings. He has allowed, since May 12th, 7 runs, 6 runs, 6 runs, 5 runs, 1 run. That was an outing where he only went 3 innings, and 7 runs. So, I mean, Matt Harvey, and by the way, he hasn't gone deeper than 4 2/3 innings in any of those starts. So this is a guy who has an ERA over 9 over the last month plus of baseball. And, even though the field's there, it's not like there's egregious amount of ownership going to the Indians. We have them at 5.8% projected ownership. So this is my most stacked team of the day today. I understand that in our top stacks, which I generally rely on pretty heavily, we do have them as negatively leveraged, but I just think that Matt Harvey defies all logic here because he just gets hit every single time he pitches.
Yeah, and I think that's certainly what's driving the singular ownership for Jose Ramirez that we talked about on FanDuel, where he's going to be decently owned. But I agree, like the stack is appealing. I do think, though, and this would be a question, I don't know if you closed it out, but how many of those Harvey games were at Baltimore versus on the road?
Let's see. It is a mix, and he sucks everywhere. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Last game was home against the Mets. He gave up 7 runs in 3 innings. One before was in Chicago, 5 runs in 3 innings. Before that was in Washington. He gave up 6 runs in 4 2/3 innings. Then another one this was a home against the Rays, 6 runs in 1 2/3 innings. Then in New York against the Mets at Citi Field, 7 runs in 4 1/3 innings.
Okay, so that one was a revenge game that didn't quite work out for him.
There's a pair of revenge games against the Mets that have not worked out for them. So he's pitched against the Mets twice in the last month. He's gone a total of 7 1/3 innings and given up 14 runs.
Yeah, I mean, look, I get it. I think you're onto it here. And I mentioned before, again, I feel like I'm repeating the same points because if you guys are on the same stream now, I feel I'm extra conscious of it that I talked about this on the tip off. But I agree with you because like the fact that the stack is going to be owned, but a lot of the ownership is going to Jose Ramirez and Eddie Rosario. And you also now have guys like Bobby Bradley in the mix who are not going to be that owned. And I think has legitimate pop as well. 212 ISO for him against right-hand pitching. And Harvey is terrible. He's terrible against everybody, but he's more terrible against lefties as well. 260 ISO allowed since 2019 to lefties, 6.3 xFIP, 1.8 whip. And it's really just a spot where I agree. You can go to the full stack. The pricing isn't that bad. It is a park downgrade to be playing in Cleveland versus Baltimore, but 5.2 implied runs. I think Cleveland is the stack to go to for a 5-mans if you're not going to play the Padres, like I would prefer to not today.
Yeah, and they're not even expensive, nor are they picking up that much ownership outside of Jose Ramirez. So we have Jose Ramirez and Cesar Hernandez on DraftKings. Those are the only 2 guys priced over 4,000. So Jose Ramirez, 6,000. He's kind of in a stratosphere of his own. But then beyond that, we have Austin Hedges as a catching option, less than 1% projected ownership. You mentioned Bradley Zimmer. He's only 2,600, 1% projected ownership. Bobby Bradley in the middle of the lineup, 4,000 reasonable price tag, 5% projected ownership. This is a team that outside of Jose Ramirez is reasonably priced. And if you remove Jose Ramirez's ownership, this is a very low owned offense.
Yeah, I agree. And that's really the main thing here. It's not crazy ownership, and you would think that it would be. And there's really no reason why, given the field's love to attack Matt Harvey and all of that it wouldn't be. Talk to me about Boston, because they are a team that's popping up a lot here on the top stack tool, or, popping up more prominently on the top stack tool with that 5% chance to be a top stack on the day. But the team, I think they are a solid play. I just don't know that they're appreciably above everybody else on the slate. That's going to be, basically flat for them. And Boston now being over 5%, they are the only other team besides the Padres who's projected for over 5% chance to be a top stack. But Tucker Davidson's not good, but certainly has been, I think, decent so far. Only a 160 batting average allowed. He's only faced 70 batters this year, 83 since last year, but he has had a 181 batting average since last year too, with the 83 batters faced. And he's been okay. I think he's going to give us some shots here, but I don't know that I feel a full Boston stack is necessarily where I'm trying to be. So how are you feeling about Boston? And I guess, are you finding them to be a viable 5-man stack?
It kind of I don't have 0 of them, but I have 3% Red Sox stacks right now. And the player I have the most exposure to is Bobby Dahlback, just because he's the flat min on DraftKings. But beyond that, on FanDuel and DraftKings, Xander Bogaerts is really expensive. JD Martinez, his price is not as high as we're typically used to seeing, but JD Martinez has scored double-digit fantasy points now just once in his last 9 games. So he's struggling a little bit. So there are individual hitters that are cheaper that I think are worth being overweight to. Hunter Renfroe, 3,800, a 1% projected ownership. Alex Verdugo, 4,000, 1% projected ownership. But it's hard for me to get up to, Xander Bogaerts at his price point. And Yeah, I think Tucker Davidson himself, I think he's probably going to regress going forward. There's just other stacks I like. It's also, I'm kind of trying to fill words to try to really explain it, but the reality is they're about appropriately owned. They're pretty expensive in terms of the guys that actually matter. And it's a 15-game slate. There's a lot of teams to choose from, and they don't really stand out above some of the other options to me.
And then one game that I'm kind of intrigued by, because let me make sure this is still the case, because it was the case earlier. Oh no, they closed the roof in Houston early in the day. I think they were expecting to have the roof open. That would have made it a little more interesting here. And I think too, I saw some talk about the Astros stack, though. It looks like that ownership has come down, but do you have any feel here for the Astros going against Kyle Gibson? I feel like it's a high implied total for Houston. And that's why, to me, it's like maybe it is a roof open day, but they're just shy of 5 implied runs going against Gibson. And Gibson, I normally hold in a decent amount of esteem. He's got a 1 whip on the year, not giving up a lot of barreled balls, a 4.5% rate there, a low batting average too, but it just seems like a high total for Houston at a spot that I guess I wouldn't necessarily expect that.
Yeah, I have 3%. I have 3% ownership to Houston as a stack right now. And Kyle Gibson's kind of weird because he's been a guy who's been pretty bad for the last few years, and he's been so much different this year than he's been in any other season. And the underlying numbers are good too. So last year he had a 5.35 ERA and a 5.7 expected ERA. The year before, 5.84 ERA, 5.03 expected ERA. This year, he has a 2.13 ERA, a 3.13 expected ERA. His velocity is up. So last year, 92.6 mile per hour fastball velocity. This year, 93.6. It's a lot of the stuff hasn't really changed in terms of strikeout rate, but he's walking a lot less guys this year. So that's a big benefit, something he's really benefiting from. But, you know, it's a lot of it also limiting some of the harder contact, limiting the walks, keeping guys off base. And that's really what's helped him.
All right, let's, for the sake of trying to talk about some more teams here and make some good time, we got about 9 minutes left till this show ends and a little bit longer than that before locks, but make sure to start thinking about getting your lineups in. And hopefully if there are any issues out there on some of the partner sites, hopefully they'll sort themselves out soon. But let's just talk through some of the most, I guess, under-owned plays or under-owned teams and give me your interest levels for them. And actually the top one in terms of leverage right now is going to be the Padres. Their ownership has come down under 20% and they are projecting for a 21% chance to be a top stack now. So we talked enough about them, but they are a team that you can find some ways to stack them up. I still would favor 3-mans, but if they're going to be under-owned flat out on the slate, maybe because of yesterday's misperformance or underperformance, I wouldn't mind getting a little bit more than I initially thought of, but just my thought there. Dodgers, Greg, though, looking like a team that is very under-owned as well. Similar odds of leverage here, similar leverage numbers for them as there are going to be for San Diego. Are you getting any Dodgers for yourself? Is that a thumbs up or a thumbs down?
No, I'm finding them very, very difficult to get to. They are so expensive. So I don't know if we got the Dodgers official lineup while we're doing this or not.
We did.
Okay. Is Cody Bellinger out of the lineup?
Cody Bellinger is in fact back out of the lineup. Yeah.
Okay. So other guys in the lineup, the price points here. So we have Will Smith is 4,900, Chris Taylor 5,300, Mookie Betts 6,200, Gavin Lux 4,300. This is a really difficult team to make 5-man stacks of, unless you're just rostering like Alex Young at pitcher, where you're going to our guy Samuel Long, right? I mean, there's only so many viable cheap pitching options on the slate, and I just don't think that it's the ideal lineup construction.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Like, I'm intrigued by the Dodgers a little bit because it is a pretty hot day. You're still not humid in LA like it was that one day that was really odd. And I think the Angels had a massive day in that one. But only 20% humidity, but 90-degree weather. I feel like not the worst going against Zach Eflin, who has really gotten beaten up by lefties over a course of time. But I'm kind of surprised the Dodgers lineup didn't have more lefties in the mix, where you have Lux up top. I feel like it's perfectly fine as a one-off, and then Beatty, but really not that many good lefty bats they have anymore. I guess no Jock in either. And but yeah, so Eflin, I think targetable, but maybe not by this particular Dodgers lineup they're throwing out. Another under-leveraged team, according to the top stacks, so it looks like it'll be the Cubs. I haven't even said a word about the Cubs today, so I'm curious if you have any thoughts about them. They don't have highest chance to be a top stack going against Taijuan Walker, only 2.3% chance of being a top stack, but because they're entirely unknown, they actually are one of the most under-leveraged teams.
Yeah, I'm still not getting to them. I mean, Walker's been so solid this year, 2.07 ERA, 3.39 expected ERA, and limiting hard contact. Also, his velocity is up to its highest rate since when he first broke into the league as a prospect. And once upon a time, he was one of the top pitching prospects in baseball, but inconsistencies, struggled with his control, and then also had some injury issues. Took him a while to get back on track. But now with the Mets, it seems like he's finally turning himself into the pitcher that everybody thought he was going to be when he first came into the league. And I think there are times to target against some of these, non-ace type starting pitchers, but not when it's a 15-game slate and not when Taijuan Walker doesn't have ownership. If this was a smaller slate where Walker was really popular. Like there was one slate. I don't know if you remember this or not, but there was an afternoon slate with 3 games, and Taijuan Walker was projected for 80% ownership up against the Orioles. That was a spot where I thought it made sense to stack against Taijuan Walker, but not on a 15-game slate where there's a lot of other good offenses.
Yeah, I agree. I think Taijuan Walker has been pretty solid on the year, and definitely some cause for concern, I think, over the course of time. I forget, it might have been you that said it, but it was on one of our MLB shows. So if not, you can take the credit either way, Greg. But somebody mentioned that he's already pitched the most innings he's ever pitched in his entire career, and I do think that could result in a little bit of depreciation to his strikeout rate, and I think we're already seeing that with him now down to 25%. But I think in the spot, I agree, like the Cubs, having no ownership is appealing, but I don't see the logic to target Taijuan Walker other than the fact that there isn't any ownership going there, and that's probably not a strong enough case on a 15-game slate. Are there any dart throw teams that you're looking at? I feel like the other leverage teams, to me, there's not the strongest argument to be made. I guess the Yankees maybe have the strongest argument to be made with a 4% chance to be a top stack. So if you have any feeling for them, feel free to throw it. But if not, let's just talk about any other teams that you do like.
Well, I'll talk about the Taijuan Walker thing because I was prepared to take the credit for whatever it was you're going to say. But here's why I'm not going to take credit. Number one, it was not me, but also number two, it's not correct. So if it was anything else, I probably would have taken credit for it. Yeah, screw them. But yeah. So I don't want to be attached to it. Or else, if it was something that I thought was good information, I would have just said, yes, that was absolutely me. But no,
I've said that now in a couple shows and been like, oh man, that's so great. And I should double check. That's why we are a data company. But anyway, Yankees, Greg, or any other stacks that you want to hit on?
Let's see. Let me look at my current stack ownership. Which teams have we not mentioned yet? The Baltimore Orioles, I think, make a little bit of sense just because we have them projected for such a high chance of being a top value stack. We currently have them with a 12.5% chance to be the top value stack of the day. That is the best of any team on the slate. And this is a team where it's really easy to make Orioles stacks and go to Yu Darvish and Trevor Rogers as starting pitchers. I said before, for anybody who wasn't listening at the top, Trevor Rogers and Yu Darvish relative to ownership. Those are my 2 favorite pitching options on Draftkings. On Fanduel, Trevor Rogers is my favorite pitching option. We have him projected for less than 1% ownership. So with that in mind, the Orioles, that's one of the offense that really enables us to be able to get up to those stud pitchers.
And actually, Dope Heathen has a question about the Milwaukee stack, so we'll touch on that in a second, but I just wanted to throw out the Washington stack going against Tyler Anderson. I am intrigued by the spot. Tyler Anderson's been getting hit pretty hard, a 10% barrel ball rate, 17-degree launch angle. This is also should be a little bit of a park downgrade for him. The Washington has not been playing that hot recently, but still 76-degree weather there, not bad. Humidity at 55%. And I think the team, too, is starting to look more like a real team to me now with guys getting back in the mix where you have Turner, you have Soto, you have Zimmerman. You are paying up to be contrarian in the spot, I would think. But with them being completely unknown and still having a positive leverage score, 3% chance of being a top stack, 2.7% ownership, I think in the spot, Washington is one team that I would throw in the mix where they're going to be tough to get to. And I think those are teams that I don't mind taking a stab at against, especially a guy like Tyler Anderson.
Yeah. So on a slate like this, there are a whole bunch of teams that have 3% projected ownership to 3% ownership of stacks to. And that is one of the teams I have. Like most of the teams I have exposure to, it's 2 to 3% stack ownership. The teams that I'm above that on significantly, at least, it's the Cleveland Indians, the San Diego Padres. And I'm going to bump up the Padres now they got that ownership update and it's come down. The Baltimore Orioles. So those are my 3 favorite stacks: the Indians, the Padres, and the Orioles. And then some of the other teams that were brought up, like against the ace starting pitchers, I just have no interest in, like the Chicago Cubs. But it's kind of, if you're playing limited lineups or if you're playing 3 lineups, my suggestion would be Indians, Padres, Orioles.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's a solid way to look at it. The Indians, certainly a team that we have talked about. We had one question here, which wasn't a super chat, but Tori Langley asking, should I go a full 5-man San Diego stack or 3 Indians and 3 San Diego? I still wouldn't go to 3 Indians and 3 San Diegos. Like you're still trying to do 5-man stacks as the base, but I think going to 5 Indians and 3 San Diego wouldn't be the worst move if you are trying to get there. But Greg, I don't know if you have any feel for that, but the main thing still be, it's a big slate. You really need to adhere to the stacking rules as much as possible.
Yeah, I would definitely say go to the 5-man stacks. If not, you're throwing darts, right? Because it's so hard on a 15-game slate to pick out which individual hitters are going to hit home runs, because that's really what you need when you have the individual hitters. Whereas you look at yesterday, a team that I liked was the Detroit Tigers. It's not like the Tigers went out there and just crushed and hit a bunch of home runs, but they ended up putting up, 7 or 8 runs on the board, and they had a bunch of hits. They had a bunch of doubles. There weren't that many offenses that went off. And just as a result of that, kind of up and down the lineup, a bunch of guys scored 12 to 16 fantasy points. And so that's why it's easier to stack than it is to pick out individual hitters. So 5-man stacks for me. And then I do want to answer Soldope. He was trying to leave the super chat before and wasn't able to, was just able to now. Favorite top 2 stacks on FanDuel, if price doesn't matter. Number one, I want to know what DFS format you're playing where the price doesn't matter, but it would be the San Diego Padres and the Cleveland Indians to me if price didn't matter.
Yeah, and according to the top stacks, still Boston would be a little bit ahead of Cleveland, but I agree. For me, it would also be San Diego and Cleveland. And again, try to manage your San Diego exposure if you are a person playing 150 or just playing a lot of lineups, because it's going to be better to get less than more. Milwaukee was the last guy. I want to make sure we hit Dope Heathen's question about them. Milwaukee, I am more of a believer in Luis Castillo, as I mentioned earlier, but I have no issue going against him too. And I think given how bad he's been on the year, I think there could be some potential, though. Again, not giving up a lot in the power metrics with only a 5.4% barrel ball rate and a 7-degree launch angle. But Greg, any thoughts for you on the Milwaukee Brewers, and maybe you like them more than I do?
No, I mean, there's been so much inconsistency with Luis Castillo. I think it makes sense to get exposure to them, but I'm not any different in the field. We have them. This is another team. We have the Padres projected for a 2% ownership share and a 3% chance of being a top stack. So I have them slightly over the field right now. And, it's not a primary stack for me by any means, but they're a team that I'm getting exposure to.
Oh, also Sildope saying he's playing long, so price irrelevant. I don't think I would play long on FanDuel. I like him on DraftKings. On FanDuel, though, you're not going to get the quality start bonus, so that seems like a pretty big thing to not have.
Yeah, and there's a chance that he might not qualify for the win bonus either, right? I mean, depending when the runs get scored when he comes into the game. So, yeah, I think long is a very risky and tough guy to roster on FanDuel, even more so than DraftKings.
What is Long's price? I would go. I don't know how cheap Long is on FanDuel. Oh, he's $5,500. Find the money to get Eduardo Rodriguez then instead, I would think.
Yeah, Rodriguez is only $900 more expensive.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I would say Sammy Long. Maybe it'll be proven wrong today, but I think you losing out on 2 potential bonuses there, or having decreased risk of at least one of them and missing out entirely on one on FanDuel, like that's a little bit more risky than I would probably try to do. All right, so that's, I guess. Well, we do have. I think we're technically supposed to be on until 7:05.
Hey, we can get people.
I got 4 more minutes in me. Sure. We'll take some questions. So drop them in. I feel like we've honestly given the most of our takes. So drop in the YouTube chat, drop in the premium Slack, whether it's super chats or not. We're going to grab a few here. Gordon asking, would you do a game stack of Baltimore and Cleveland on DK? I don't think Baltimore is a team that graded out too well for me today. Going against Quantrill, I kind of get it, though. He's really a guy that's going to give up a lot of cheap hits and not anything too impressive, only a 2.1% run rate. So to me, Baltimore and Cleveland, like I don't have anything against it conceptually, Greg, that they're in the same game. But those two teams, like Cleveland is the priority for me. Baltimore, I just don't see it.
No, I said before I like Baltimore a lot. They were one of the 3 stacks
you're
most just because they're so cheap and they have the best odds of being a top stack on the slate. So just because of the pitchers I'm prioritizing, I get to the Orioles. They make it easy to pay up for Trevor Rogers, Darvish.
And then Jason Martinez saying red stack wins all the money tonight. I do like the red stack. I mentioned that earlier as well, but I think going against Brett Anderson, I guess we haven't talked enough about this. I think I might have said this on the tip off, but the Reds going against Brett Anderson, I think is a pretty good spot. He's a guy who's not giving up a lot of home runs, but is in that Matt Harvey tier of dudes who just get hit really hard and give up a ton of hits. So to me, Cincinnati, I think a very strong play today, and one that really Ohio dominating in terms of the stacks that I'm most interested in today.
By the way, we do have. Here's the way we can close with. People are asking us for home run picks. So we could. That's something we could close with.
Okay. Let's see.
Let's rules. No Coors Field guys, and
yes. Though it's worth pointing out the odds on Fernando Tatis, if they are still where they are before the show, that he's plus 280 and somehow the number 5 overall home run pick for the odds that we have on OddsShopper. Like that's still a bet. If you can get that at a book, check oddshopper.com or oddshopper.awesemo.com. But that bet to me is still a really strong home run bet, even independent of what we're going to pick here. But I'll get the first pick.
I'm going to take Eddie Rosario. I like picking on Matt Harvey. I think that Matt Harvey is very likely to give up one, if not multiple homers today. I don't know if he's made a start this year, actually, where he hasn't given up at least one homer. So Eddie Rosario, I think one of the players more likely in the Indians lineup to hit a long ball.
So this guy's come through for me as a home run pick within the last week, I think, but it's not great park factors. But going against J-Hap, I guess is his own park factor. But Tom Murphy, just a guy who blasts left-handed pitching, and J-Hap has just been awful on the year. Not been a little bit better historically against, better historically against lefties. Much worse against righties. A 236 ISO allowed to righties, 5% home run rate. So to me, Tom Murphy, I don't love the Seattle stack, but Murphy as a catcher, I think an interesting one-off today, and certainly a good home run pick. Actually, the Seattle stack, honestly, you could talk me into a little bit of that, given that we didn't hit on them at all.
Would you Seattle?
Seattle stack.
I prefer the Casey Mize side of the game. I think that as a pitcher who has less than 1% projected ownership, I've talked about it before, that just somebody, he's pitched better over the last month. I'm going to believe in the arm talent there. And so for me, I'm on Casey Mize a little bit, and the Mariners, at least earlier in the day, let me see in the updated ownership, but the last run of it, we had the Mariners as the most negatively leveraged team of the day. Let's see if that's still the case. Still negatively leveraged. We currently have them with a 1.3% chance of being the top stack of the day and a 2.6% ownership share. I don't have the Mariners in my player pool.
All right, we're going to be locked by the time you guys hear this one, so make sure you get those lineups in. If you haven't by now, you might just be screwed, but always an important part of the process in DFS. We don't talk about it enough, but getting lineups in, definitely going to be crucial for you in most of these endeavors. Hit that like button if you can, guys, while you go. We appreciate it a bunch here. I didn't pander for likes during the show because we want to make sure to give you guys the best show possible. So show the love on the way out. Get us to 200 likes on the way out. We got just shy of 400 people in here, so help us out. And Greg, what are the plugs for you here? I know we do have the NBA Live Before Lock show coming up with your usual deeper dive co-host. It'll be Lofty and Adam doing that for NBA. So stay tuned for that coming up in 25 minutes on the Awesemo channel. Give the people the plugs though, Greg.
Follow me on Twitter, Mlb Dfs. Beyond that, I will be doing a baseball show probably with you tomorrow. And then I'm also doing a Monkey Knife Fight show with Eric. Then I'll be doing the NBA show at night. So lots of stuff tomorrow. But for today, I am done. I get to go cry in my bed about my house getting ruined.
Everybody say a quick prayer for Greg's house and hope that works out for everybody. But yeah, check me out tomorrow. I will be on that early show with Greg for MLB early live before lock. Then I'll have the MLB deeper dive. Then I'll have the final episode, the tip off tomorrow while it goes. So I guess final for now, going on hiatus and all that. So check out all of that content on the channel and stay tuned. NBA live before lock coming up in 25 minutes with Lofty and Adam. So you're getting the best of the deeper dive and NBA live before lock. Follow at Mlb Dfs, follow at Chris Spags, follow at Awesemo_com. I don't know where I'm pointing to. Hopefully some are useful. Appreciate you guys for being here. Have a great night. Good luck.